People don't even gavel. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the March 10th meeting of the Averill School Board. If I could have everybody stand for the pledge. Oh.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we're sort of going to hear from Jim first, but it's going to be a quick one.
Good evening. So usually we have a news and updates as well as a video. We just met recently, so I did not do a news and updates portion. There was nothing to report that was new. And we have a rather lengthy agenda tonight, so we'll skip right to the celebrations of success video. Thanks to Brian Radowitz for once again putting that video together for us, and includes a brief superintendent's report.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I love those videos, honestly. Okay. We've got a few presentations now, and I believe we're going to start with special education. And look, it's right up.
So as we get started, I do want to just point out, doing it a little bit different tonight. There are some additions to the proposed budget. So we asked Sarah, who is our director of special education, Keith, our high school principal, and Kate, who oversees the nurses, to just speak to the board regarding some of those things that we are looking to do. I wanted you to have some more information to help you be more informed as we go forward, and those things are going to be built into the actual recommended budget presentation that I'm going to do after they are done. So with that, we'll turn it over to Sarah, our director of special education.
All right, hello everyone. It's great to be here this evening. It's really a privilege to be able to speak to some of the shifts that we're looking at for next year with our special education programming in our elementary schools. I'm starting us off with a short quote here. Great things in education are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people. This was shared with me by one of our elementary principals, and It really, for me, set the stage of what we're talking about for our special education programming in terms of not only the inclusive philosophy of the work to be discussed, but also the commitment to collaboration and shared responsibility for meeting the needs of all of our students that is part of the shift we're discussing this evening. Within special education for our students within general education settings, there are two models that we have available for delivery of instruction. One of those models is the one that we currently do now. That's a consultant teacher model, and I'll talk more about that specifically. The model that we're shifting to or moving forward to is an integrated co-teaching model, and I'll be speaking more specifically about that model as well. In the model that we're currently using, we have a consultant teacher. That's your special education teacher. That person is responsible for providing specially designed instruction to just the student or the students, groups of students with disabilities. That specially designed instruction is calculated to allow students to benefit from general education instruction. The special education teacher is responsible to adapt and modify that general education curriculum, again, for students with disabilities. The special education teacher is not, under this model, however, responsible for any of the primary instruction that takes place. So really, to kind of separate it out, in the consultant teacher model, the role of the special education teacher is to focus on the accommodations and the modifications for the identified students, while the instructional plans are developed by the general education teacher. So there's a bit of a separation under this model, which is partially why we would like to make the shift as a district to an integrated co-teaching model. The difference you'll see, well, there's a lot of differences, but one of the differences here is that first bullet where you'll see the specially designed instruction is linked right to the academic instruction for all students. Again, you see that the curriculum is adapted and modified, but this is within that linked or collaborated, specially designed instruction and academic instruction, allowing us to have more accessible classrooms for all students. And this model is strongly encouraged by the New York State Education Department. So the next couple slides I can speak to from personal and professional experience. I had the absolute privilege to be a co-teacher in one of these classrooms for many years. Also to be an administrator helping to implement and build co-taught classrooms. So I can really speak to the magic that happens in these types of classrooms and with excitement towards this opportunity for our students here in Averill Park. This shared responsibility is really, again, as we switch from the more siloed approach under consultant teacher to more connected approach, that shared responsibility for all aspects of the day, the instruction, the planning, and the assessment for our students. The lessons are differentiated across the day, differentiated lessons and activities. Again, that targeted support then applies to students with learning differences. We know now more than ever, we do see a lot of learning differences for our students in our classroom, and this model allows us to respond to that as well. It also gives two teachers with varied teaching approaches the ability to make more connections with students through that collaboration that takes place. The benefits, again, this is kind of the heart of the program, if you will, or the model. There are multiple access points to learning in a co-taught classroom. The students in the classroom experience an increased sense of belonging. Again, there's multiple spaces for students to experience success throughout their day in the inclusive environment of a co-taught classroom. Students demonstrate improved social skills when they see two adults planning for their needs and strengths and celebrating with them together every day. That shows improved social skills for our students. Also more individualized attention when you have those two adults. I just think back to the days of when I was co-teaching, again, when I had that privilege, and just the tag team nature of knowing exactly what you had planned together and then implementing it together throughout the day results in more individualized attention for our students. Those collaborative partnerships mean everything. And this model is also aligned to our commitment to meet the needs of every student every day. The co-taught model is research-based. A few of the outcomes that research has demonstrated is higher academic achievement for all students. That's not just our students with disabilities or our general education students, but all students. Increased student engagement, I talked a little bit about that through the differentiation, through having 2 teachers, through having multiple access points. The positive impact for our students with disabilities, and also benefits higher level critical thinking skills. And that's some of what the research tells us foundationally is a benefit to this program, to this model. In a co-taught model, the roles are blended and combined between the 2 teachers, the general education and the general education teacher and the special education teacher. Those teams are unified and they experience a shared responsibility for all aspects of the day. The 2 teachers have a commitment to this model. They get to, right? It's again, that thinking back to being in the classroom, you get to share your expertise, you get to share your strengths, and you get to also share the challenges that do appear in our classrooms at times. And teachers who are excited about this model are ready for a shift to how we've designed instruction historically in a consultant versus a co-teach model. And it really starts to look like less of yours, mine, and your students and my students, and more of our students as we plan day to day for them. In order to implement this shift, we will be looking to provide professional development for our students, for our teachers, I mean. That professional development starts with relationship building. Relationships are the foundation of a successful co-taught model. And then we lead into the pedagogy and instructional foundations, again, those hallmarks of what a co-taught classroom looks like, how you plan for it and how you implement it. The collaborative partnerships are not just within the classroom, but it is a supportive commitment to this model outside of the classrooms, in the buildings as a whole, from our entire elementary leadership team, as well as district leadership is supportive of a commitment to this program. For next year, we would be building co-taught teaching teams in grades 2 through 5. So in each building, there would be 1 co-taught classroom at each grade. We would continue the consultant teacher model in grades K1. I just told you all the great things about co-teach, so why not K1? But it really is, I've definitely learned in my relatively short time here the importance of database decision-making and maintaining fiscal responsibility. And at this time, our student numbers at those lower levels are just not stable enough to be able to make a recommendation to make the fiscal commitment to supporting these co-taught classrooms at the lower levels. And I just like to kind of start with a quote, end with a quote, but this is just the beginning, right? And it will be an implementation plan. We'll be working together through it. Talking to teachers about this, though, I do feel that this is just the beginning, that we're going to work together through this because that's what we do here for all of our students. Any questions?
So the implementation for next year, 2 through 5, with the plan for it to be rolled up with the students that are already in that model, is it like a growing build out, or is it just an elementary build out?
If the appetite is there for it to build into the middle school for 6th grade, we would look to do that as well. So the higher you get in the grade levels, the co-taught model does become a little more tricky when you get into higher level content, but it is still feasible in a middle school level. We would just have to work within the systems and structures that exist there to see if it is feasible.
Okay, and if it's not feasible, then what does that transition look like for the students coming out of 5th grade, going into 6th grade, where their special education model then reverts or changes? Lots of special education kids don't do well with transitions as it is, so transitioning a entirely different model could be a challenge.
Yeah, and I've definitely talked to Mr. Messia and staff at the middle school about rolling this up to the middle school. I think there is interest in doing that. It does look a little bit different at the secondary level though, as we get into higher level subject. And many I honestly don't know of any districts that are doing co-taught at a secondary level. It's a very natural kind of shift to go from co-taught to consultant at a secondary level. That doesn't mean I don't think it won't happen or couldn't happen here.
Something too, Megan, that's gonna come up throughout the presentation as we go forward. The middle school is going to have to be, in the future, looking at how to do all things, right? The smaller enrollment that we are seeing is now really K-5, and so start making its way up to Algonquin. So we've had talks with Sarah and with Rob about what things look at Algonquin at a larger scale, including special education, as that smaller groups of cohort to get to that. So there's a short and smaller picture to that, and then there's a bigger one too that we have to apply. Of course, cost being a part of it, and the opportunity to do it financially as well as the model delivery. So certainly on our radar, and that's the hope.
Okay.
Good question.
Is there any correlation, I've spoke about it in the past about the kids that are not designated as special education, but also struggle, so the kids that fall into that AIS contingent where they need the intervention and the challenges that we've had from a budgetary standpoint, providing the AIS services, is there sort of an overlap that would benefit those students in this co-teaching model? Is there any research to that?
Yeah, potentially, yes. I think when it comes to developing class lists for our co-taught classrooms, I want to work closely with principals that the general education students in the classroom should mirror the general education students in the building as a whole, if that makes sense. So we would need to continue to make balanced class lists across both the co-taught classroom and the non-co-taught classroom.
Okay, last question. Does the structure of the co-teaching environment change the layout of the day where we change their access to specials and enrichment, and does it hinder the core teaching or the core teacher from enrichment, sort of autonomy in the enrichment in their class?
No, in fact, just the opposite, because again, you're looking at two adults being responsible for designing the instruction of the day. So it actually creates more opportunities for more differentiation within the day with two adults being responsible for providing that support.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
It's nice to meet you, to hear from you. Why wouldn't we do this? You used the phrase, make the fiscal commitment, so I think it may be expense that may be in the way, like why we wouldn't have done this in the past if it's all full of goodness. Any downfalls?
I've only been here for 7 months, so I don't know that I have a history lesson on that question. It does require more adults to be able to implement the model.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got close to doing it last year, and it was a financial reason that we did.
Okay. That's all, thanks.
All right, Michelle, you
So I was curious, I guess, and I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, how are you gonna balance these classrooms with the higher achieving students, I guess would be politically correct, and the special needs students, like, I guess, how is that level going to work?
Well, again, because every lesson throughout the day is differentiated and shared responsibility of two adults, it allows for multiple access points. When the lessons are designed, there can be increased differentiation because you have two adults responsible for accomplishing multiple levels within a whole classroom, where in a non-co-taught classroom, it would just be one.
So I guess what would change currently with what we're doing? Like right now, we pull out students like for AIS, right? They kind of go in and out. Would we still be doing that as well? Or no, you're talking about ending all of that and just having another teacher in those classrooms?
No, we still have AIS. We will still have AIS next year. This is just the special education classroom model. if I'm understanding your
So
question.
students with IEPs have a consultant teacher that in some cases they push into the class and work with the special education students for specific subjects. Where this would sort of provide a permanent solution in the classroom across, so a more integrated model where as opposed to separating out those students with their co-teacher for instructional purposes.
Because again, in a co-taught model, responsibility for instruction for any group of students, whether it's a heterogeneous group or a homogeneous group, any lesson throughout the day can be supported by either the general education teacher or the special education teacher. There may be students within a co-taught classroom, just like we have students in some of our consultant teacher sections that still require a pull-out reading intervention from either AIS or a special education teacher. That will not change under this shift.
Thank you.
I think
Am
just,
I allowed to
Jeannie
ask
had
a
her hand
question?
up and then just me. But, you want to go first?
I have two questions. One is, you noted on there that I think it was overall the academics of all the kids improved. Would you be able to send copies of those studies to the board that shows that?
I can take a look and find some research and send it directly to you, absolutely.
Okay, and I imagine there's some downsides to this. So when they do the studies of the integration, what were kind of the cons of following this model?
I have a hard time, both as a parent who's had a child in a classroom that has multiple adults, also as the educator in class with multiple adults, identifying the negatives. I've just seen, I think 10, 12 years of my career were in a co-taught classroom, plus years providing administrative support for our classrooms. I have a hard time identifying the negatives. I can find some research that talks about negatives, but watching it in action, when you have those collaborative teams that are committed to the model and supporting the needs of all students, that's what happens. I know that sounds very probably Pollyanna, but that's how I approach this work, and that's been my experience with this work.
Just you.
I wanted to say thank you, first of all, because I think this was good overview. And my question too was similar to Jess's, like, my first thought was like, oh, do we have data to support the achievement? And you say there is research out there, and I wrote down higher academic achievement for all students. And I think that's super, super valuable. And the other thing that I was really glad to hear is that there will be professional development on how to implement this, because I can imagine, I'm going through something similar at work, shifting the way we used to do something to the way we need to do something now to meet different metrics and budget constraints that I have in my office. And it's a little scary, but it's actually really exciting too. And so I'm assuming that everybody's feeling a little bit of that too, but being able to have the professional development to be able to learn how to do this most effectively is going to be a real asset. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Anybody else want to follow up or?
Well, I see the potential of this too, to just reduce the feelings of otherness that can happen for some students when they, there's a particular teacher pushing in, and those kids have awareness of like, who is the kid that works with Mrs. So-and-so. So just reducing, opportunities where kids would feel othered. I see a lot of great potential on that. And this might be a question more for Jim than it would be for you, but you mentioned there were financial reasons why it didn't happen. I'm guessing or hoping that in recommendations we'll hear more about that, because I still am not sure I'm clear on understanding what would be the different like fiscal commitment and what that difference is to understand that.
I got 55 slides coming your way.
Okay.
One of them will cover that.
Okay, thank you.
And you're absolutely right. There was a bullet point on one of these slides about the increased sense of belonging, and that's exactly what you're speaking to.
So what's funny is that the notes that I typed down are very similar to what everybody else touched on. I'm sure that Jim is going to give us some financial information, so thanks for that. And I do wonder, some of the research that I've seen in terms of different age groups. So that was kind of my first question was, what was the research that indicated the higher achievement for everybody? It actually does make sense if you looked at like Montessori integrates age groups, and they say that integrated age groups makes all age groups do better. And so I do wonder if it's a similar thing going on. I also wonder if it's just if you have increased engagement, right? The more books you read, the more words you're going to know. So the more engaged you are, the more you're going to pick up. But that's me speculating, and excited if you do get that research.
You're right on board. Your speculation is not inaccurate.
That master's degree wasn't and my only other question, and this is maybe sort of obvious, but I'm in favor of saying the obvious out loud and not assuming. So when you get on the board and you learn about, you know, the web of special education law and process and certification, it's a huge learning curve, and I can't imagine what it's like for the actual practitioners. You guys are geniuses. But we do learn, right, there are different kind of levels of intervention, you know, like from an AIS or from minimal intervention to, you know, we learn about least restrictive. And so when you get into situations where there are more challenging, if someone's on like the further end of the spectrum in terms of their needs, that gets taken into account in what kind of room they're put in. We don't just put aside those kind of, those least restrictive or higher needs approach. And again, it sort of seems obvious that we're not going to put, you know, somebody with very high needs in a place that is not suitable, in a room that's not suitable, or it's too much for the teacher. But I just want to say it out loud because I'm Captain Obvious, and I like saying things like that.
Yeah, and these two models are the models in our general education classroom, right? We still have our special classes for students who may have more significant needs requiring a higher level of adult support throughout the balance of their day. One thing that I'm not sure if it was on one of the slides, but a co-taught classroom can increase opportunities for some of the students that may have needed more of a restrictive classroom. It does create less restrictive opportunities for some of those students once we kind of have those classrooms fully operational. We may be able to increase opportunities for some other students as well.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? It's very interesting, and I'm really eager to see how this goes. Okay. I think we're good. We have a bunch more presentations, so thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
We look forward to hearing more. Okay. Mr. Keely.
So next up, he's going to talk to us a little bit about the potential for a high school business program, something that foreshadowing the upcoming recommended budget you're going to see in the recommendation to the board to begin a business program here in the high school.
All right, Dr. Francini, thank you. Thank you guys for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm expecting to share with you probably about 5 minutes worth of information with the objective of really giving you some background that will help you to think a little bit about the benefits of the addition of a high school business program into next year. So specifically, I've got 3 objectives that I want to make sure to cover with you tonight. One is to just give you some background with regards to what the rest of the Capital District currently looks like statistically in terms of offerings of business programs throughout high schools in the region. After that, I want to give you some information about historically what business programs have looked like at Averill Park High School in the past. And basically where we've come from that perspective. And then finally, just give you some information about the timing, the urgency, and really a vision for sort of what a business program might look like if we can get one reinstated at Averill Park High School. So starting off everything, I think it's almost a no-brainer, right? That in every way, shape, or form possible, the potential addition of a business program is very well aligned with our work and our mission, both as a district and certainly at the high school. And when we talk about making sure that our students are college and career ready and have access to multiple pathways that are relevant and that will prepare them for life after high school, I think you will find that a business program at the high school will certainly lend itself to all of our goals that are central to what we do each day when we come to work. So that said, let's just take a look at the capital region, right? We reached out to districts throughout the capital district. We reached out to urban schools, suburban schools, rural schools, and everything in between. In the end, that breaks down to our partners in Suburban Council, as well as our 3 BOCs. We got 18 different schools to respond over the past couple of weeks, and you can see that we've broken that down really into 2 different kinds of schools. 8 of the districts that we heard from are schools that are sort of similar to us in population. These are schools that have districts that have less than 2,000 students enrolled, whereas the other school districts were ones that had greater than 2,000 districts enrolled, or 2,000 students enrolled. So with that said, these are the results that we saw from our neighboring districts. Out of all 18 of the school districts that we reached out to, all the districts had a business teacher and or a business program. You can see the breakdown a little bit in some of the smaller districts, the ones that had less than 2,000 students. You can see that of those 8, all had either a business teacher or a business program. So even in our smaller counterparts throughout the capital district, business programs and business teachers exist, right? Almost unanimously across the board. The difference between teacher and program is that there were 2 districts within that cohort of 8 who have a program, but we're currently still working to staff that program with an appropriate business teacher. They had not let the program go, however. In our larger districts, those are the ones with greater than 2,000 students, you can see that across the board, everyone had at least 1 business teacher. So you can see that everybody had at least 1 business teacher. The range, right, was from 1 business teacher all the way up to 7 and everything in between. So you can imagine our larger school districts had 7, and the smaller ones had 1 or 1.5 business teachers. The point, however, I think to make is that when you look at Averill Park High School compared to every other school within the capital district, there's no question that we are kind of on an island on our own in not having a business program that we can offer to our students. So that said, when was the last time that we did have a business program, and what did that look like in the past? So when you take a look at our history of having business programs at Averill Park High School, you can see that the last time that we had a business program was the 2010-2011 school year. In that year, we had 1 teacher and 6 courses. The year before, we had 2 teachers and 11 courses. And the year before that, we had 3 teachers with 15 courses available to our students. And that 2008-2009 configuration is then very stable and static as you keep going back into the 90s, into the 80s, and Mrs. Perez even said we could go back into the 70s and we would still see that model and that level of course offerings being offered to our students at Averill Park High School. I shared with you on the other side of the screen just a snapshot of some of the courses that were available to our students through that business program. Many of these are courses that are still very relevant, and a number of them, both in this older model for us and in models throughout the capital district, offer a number of opportunities for students to earn college credit while they're in high school in a pathway in the business area. So that said, we now know that Averill Park is in a unique position to not have a business program, and we know what our business programs have looked like in the past. So as we think about right now, I think that this is a nice opportunity for us to create a marriage of need and opportunity. Honestly, on the need side, we know that a business program will add tremendous value to the experience of our students in terms of preparing them for different pathways and for life after high school. Certainly very relevant, certainly something that is in high demand, right? There is no question that it's a pathway that will make a big difference for so many students at Averill Park High School. At this point, right, our students are truly at a competitive disadvantage when it comes to that area of preparation and having access to that pathway. And we know that state ed, right, as it's creating differentiated pathways for graduation, this will be another opportunity for our students to really be able to engage in a pathway that is highly relevant, right? So the need is definitively there. At the same time, this year, when you move into looking at the proposed budget for the upcoming school year, you will note that we have a reduction in technology at the high school, which is a result of attrition through a retirement in the technology department. Behind that, what you should know is for the past 3 years, the technology department and its curriculum renewal team have been working really, really hard to streamline what our technology department and our project lead the way and engineering sequence will look like for the next 3 to 5 years. That team, at the end of its 3 years, put together a plan for after this year for us to be able to continue to deliver our full project lead the way sequence and most all of our technology program without the replacement of that position, right? So as a result of that, we have the opportunity now, and it was actually a part of the curriculum renewals recommendation to us when they came to us at the end of that process. We have the opportunity to create another pathway in business for our students while still maintaining the technology programming, the project lead the way, and the engineering sequences that we've traditionally had at Averill Park High School. So Dr. Francini coined the phrase, as we've talked through some of these things, it's a generational sort of opportunity, right? It's been well over a generation of students since we've had a business program. Here we have an opportunity to not lose the relevancy of a program, but to capitalize on that reduction to create a new program and grow that out, right? So if we don't potentially take this opportunity to do this, it could be a whole nother generation of students before we're in a place where we can do this again. So this is an absolutely important time for us to seriously consider the marriage of need and opportunity and how this could be the platform upon which we grow forward and create this opportunity for students at Averill Park. So what might a business program look like, right? This is the final component to that. If we were to be able to achieve this teaching position in business, there would be 3 primary components to a business program. We would be able to launch next year a minimum of 4 business courses in year 1. I say a minimum because if they're full year courses, we could achieve 4. If the person coming to the table works out some full year courses and some half year courses, it could be 6. If it's all half year course, it could be 8, right? So we know that we can achieve next year a minimum of 4, potentially more business courses for our students. What that would look like would depend greatly on who we bring in, what their experiences were, what their background were in teaching, and we certainly want to get some input from that person in order to determine which final outcomes we went with. The second component would be that we would be able to finally have, right, what's known as a Career Exploration and Internship Program, CEIP, which is something that we've been missing for a long time, right? Right now, our students do not have access to systematic and program-related internships throughout the Capital District. This position would allow us to be able to do that. And the final important component that we could put into place with this business position would be that we would finally have a person who could serve as coordinator for the Career Development and Occupational Studies certification, the CDOS credential, that we do not currently offer to our students at Averill Park High School, right? And that is a credential that can be offered to both special education students at the high school as well as general education students. And we are definitely in the minority with regards to not offering that as well. So these are the 3 areas that I would see us growing with this position, and I do believe that they're very impactful. So that's the story, right? We've talked a little bit about, again, what other districts look like in the Capital District. We've talked a little bit about the history of business programs at Averill Park High School. And then we really talked about why now might be the time to make sure that we do this. So if you have any questions, here I am.
I was curious if you had a sense, you mentioned in looking at how other school districts are doing this and what their numbers are, you mentioned that there are at least 2 schools that have the program, have not been able to staff it yet. Do you anticipate any difficulty being able to staff like such a position? Do you have a sense of how difficult we're talking there?
I think being who we are in the Capital District, being the district that we are, with the reputation that we are, I think that we are a very attractive place for people to come and put down roots. And I think that reputation precedes itself. I'm fairly confident that we can get a very, very highly qualified and potentially experienced and really passionate person in this position to grow the program.
We do tend to win them over with our winning personalities.
I agree.
But
I
just
agree.
because we had that conversation recently in looking at offerings such as French, I didn't know if there was any
Yeah.
statistics in terms of the availability of those teachers. And I know you talked about this in, to some degree in your previous report to the board earlier this year. I know that there's differences in the program, but I know that some of our students do some sort of internship work with BOCES as well. So can you speak at all to, are there any components? I hear what you're saying, this is a different certification program, but I'm just wondering, will this interact or change some of the utilization we have with BOCES where
Right.
students are getting some internship experience?
The only systematic internship experience that we have within our building, right, is we have maintained a sort of CEIP program, which is an internship program that for the past several years has been done by a random social studies teacher here and there who had room in their schedule, right? The person, many people might remember we had a health teacher, Mrs. Ashline. She carried that on for years, right? When Mrs. Ashline left, she took that passion and that purpose and that commitment to that kind of with her, right? And in the absence of business, we recruited a lot of wonderful people who said, I'll give that a try for another year, right? If you look at our course catalog for next year, we do not at this moment, we are not even offering any career exploration or internship program for 25-26 because there isn't staff in the building who are able to really commit to doing it. It's a tremendous amount of work, right, to set up the networking, the communication, and the contracts and the agreements with local businesses. It's above and beyond what a different content area teacher can just do in a block, whereas a business teacher can come to the table and really grow this forward for us. So I think that's the big difference. And the short answer is after this year, in the absence of a position like this, we won't offer this experience to kids moving forward.
I apologize, I have a few questions.
Sure.
And first, I just want to say how thrilled I am to hear about even the potential for a business program. I know Michelle and I have talked repeatedly, both of us being business degrees, that we don't offer it because it is so crucial. Even basic accounting, just for kids before they go out into any business, it touches everything, understanding debits and credits. And, you know, in some ways that lends back to the old home ec of learning how to balance a budget and write a checkbook. So I'm thrilled with that. That being said, one, I guess I'll ask you all of them, you can decide what order you want to answer.
Okay.
One is this need otherwise met through doing a program at Hudson Valley or anywhere else locally? Because I do think they have a business program there. Two, I want to get a better understanding of how the technology program is going to stay, but we're also still going to be able to offer a business program. And then three, have we done a polling of the students already for their interest in business courses? And then maybe just one final comment. Some of those courses, it's possible just because we're going back to 2011 and prior, may be outdated, like keyboarding. I was thinking maybe my fifth grader seems okay with the keyboard at this point. Maybe some of those are antiquated, but it sounds like you're on top of that. So I guess those are my questions,
Yeah.
however you want to answer them.
I'm gonna try to remember a few of the questions.
I'll remind you if you forget.
Yeah, anything I miss, just let me know, right? We have not yet polled students, because this is one of our first entry points with regards to the potential for there to be a business program. So when we know that this is happening, we will absolutely poll students to get a sense of what their interests are. You should also know that I have reached out to all the Suburban Council and Questar 3 principals to find out what are the most marketable and highly enrolled business courses that they're currently offering, just to get some targets. I do want to balance that very carefully with whoever the person is and what experiences they bring and what their strengths and weaknesses are, right? So without question, that's big. All right, just hit me with one more of the questions, sorry.
Just whether or not this is, given, really I only ask because of the financial constraints of the
Sure.
district, is it something that can be taken care of through relationship with Hudson Valley?
Right. Okay, that's a great question. I would say conceptually, right, I think the challenge with taking care of those sorts of things through Hudson Valley is always going to be that we would need to provide time for our students to leave the campus, to go to another location, to take time out of their already competitive 8-block schedule, and all of the different course selections and things that they want to engage in. It is definitely more efficient to bring this program in-house where it can exist in our master schedule, where we can manage it and make sure that students have access to the program. And I think we'll be much more successful knowing that kids can do that here. With technology, right, that was a really great question as well. Like, how are we going to explain the project through the sequence? What the technology curriculum renewal team did is they came back to us with a plan to implement the entire sequence with both the originator or the entry-level courses, and then at the other end, the capstone. Everything else in the middle cycles in 2-year sequences through a single teacher, right? So we're actually able to offer the entire sequence to every student, but we cycle the classes that are offered every other year, right? So what we've been able to do is instead of offering everything every single year, we offer them in cycles except for the beginning and the end. So the curriculum team put together an amazing plan to cycle courses and to make sure that any kid who comes in 9th grade has access to what they need over the course of 4 years, but with the stuff in the middle being cycled through in choice and without a particular order. You take it when it's offered, and then you work your way through. So the curriculum team came to us with a map that solved that problem, and then when they solved the problem, they suggested, we have a lot of kids who need business. Think about that too. So they did a really great job with this over the 3 years that they planned. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Did anybody else?
So, I actually, once just asked that question, I thought I did remember that in your presentation earlier this year, that there was some like mild polling of the current tech students about if we offered this or that. Because I remember there being discussion of if they even understood what those classes were, but that too was only a smaller pool of students because it was the students already involved in tech, it wasn't the
Yes.
wider population.
No, you're spot on. So they did not poll what kinds of business courses students would like, but the technology department did poll if we offered business courses, would you be interested? And we did see obviously that, there were a number of students who were interested, a lot of students, right? Their objective in doing that was to make sure that if in the end they couldn't solidify like continuity in their own program, that there would be other programs that kids could go into and stay engaged, right? But in the end, they did a really great job with the tech component. And yes, we know that students will engage in business if we give them the opportunity to do that.
Thanks.
Same questions as Jeff.
I just wanted to say thank you and please extend the gratitude towards that tech team that came up with this, because this again demonstrates the creative thinking that goes on in here in Averill Park to make sure our students get what they need. And, and so we can take advantage of that generational opportunity that comes along. We appreciate that.
I just was looking over at these guys, I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but have you guys heard anything, like do you have classmates who you think could use a counselor?
I do know a lot of people who are like very interested in like business, and that's like a broad kind of thing to go into, but like if they have this experience early on in high school, I feel like that's the push that they need to pursue that. And again, it's like broad, so they can learn a bunch of things too, even if they're not like quite sure they want to go into something like business. And I think just this program would really help out with those kids who might be discouraged because there isn't really anything here, and like you might not want to go find the college course somewhere else to take that. So
And then I can kind of speak to what Teddy said as well. Like when you think about like the subsets of programs we've offered at our school, like if you look around, it's like the arts program is clearly like has some amazing students. We just had people here a couple of like meetings ago talking about how wonderful the music and our like theater programs are. I can speak to like our science classes that I've taken, Intro to the Human Brain. I even took like a class on criminal justice, and I'm going into medicine, but it was just cool. So I think it's really cool we can offer all these subsets.
And about the idea of like a Hudson Valley class, like I know we're taking classes at Hudson Valley right now. I have like over 30 credits and both of them are transferring. So and you have to pay for them. So I think that's also something to think about too. Like I don't know how that would work if it's through the high school, but like I know some mine went through the high school and we still have to pay for them. And they're really hard to transfer and they don't go on your high school transcript, so the kids aren't gonna get like the credit or like recognition from colleges that they would want. So,
Thanks, that's good input.
that's helpful, yeah.
And also, just to clarify that any association with Hudson Valley, like somebody be paying for that too, right? That's- They're not like, here, you go. Okay. And so I'm sure we're gonna hear a little bit more about numbers in your 55 slides, Jim. I'm really, are we good next?
I just want to say, I actually moved into the district in 2011. And one of the things that attracted me to live in Averill Park District and seek it out was the enrichment and the quality of the school district here. I have not been disappointed at all since I've been here. And I'm so glad that we're moving back in the direction to offer this level of enrichment to the kids because our kids deserve everything. So, thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you.
As Keith knows, probably everybody knows, I'm really passionate about trying to get business back in our school. And so when we talk about for whom this course will be directed, I think it's about north of 25% of our students don't go to higher ed after high school, right? And our goal is make them college and career ready. So they're career ready. So a lot of them go into the trades. They're plumbers, they're carpenters. We have fantastic, automotive and CTE programs as well. But they leave the school going into the trades thinking that I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And what we need them to think about is, hey, I'm going to learn how to do this, and someday going out on my own and running my own business isn't something crazy because I had a little foundation in that and I think I can do that. And that's what we owe our kids.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more, right? This one is it's an exciting potential opportunity. It's a big one.
I'm just gonna say one more thing, again, obviously, back on one of your slides when there was like 15, right? Or you're going back to like 2010, 2000. And, we are, just for clarity's sake, we do have fewer students, right? So it's not, like if we don't have 15 classes, we're okay, but I appreciate the effort on everybody's part to recognize how worthwhile it is to get it back when we can. And, it's not gonna be the scope it was, and that's okay, because there's fewer kids, but we're definitely,
Yeah.
I have no doubt it'll be some quality, so.
Thank you. When you think about 4 sections, right, of business courses, maybe 20, 25 students, you're talking about affecting 100 students at the high school. That's big. We don't need 15 courses. Like 4 is huge.
Yeah.
So we're excited.
Anybody else? All right. Thanks, Mr. King.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Heath. And last on the presentation list before the recommended budget, is Kate's been talking a little about nursing. In one of her many roles in the district, Kate oversees the nursing, does a great job with a fantastic staff. And talk about some of the changes that we're looking for to implement in this budget with the nursing department.
Thank you. Again, I heard about 55 slides, so I only have 3. We're including the title there. The good news is I think we all understand what school nurses do. We either have all gone to visit one at some time when we were students, or you've gotten the phone call as a parent that says, your kid's sick, we need you to come up and pick them up at school. So I just want to kind of give you a scope of what our supports look like here in our district. We do have 6 full-time district nurses. We have 1 nurse who is
Can
assigned
you
to.
just click the slideshow so it's bigger on this?
Oops, my bad.
Thank you.
We have 1 assigned to each of our school buildings. And we do also have another one who supports all of them and moves around between them, primarily supporting the middle school and the high school so that we can lower that nurse-student ratio or the student-nurse to ratio. We also provide services to the Parker School, the private school within our district. We are mandated to do that as well. So she goes out there couple days a week. And we also obviously want to support our elementaries, not just our secondaries. And she does a bit of work onboarding our new nursing staff and substitutes. And if you've been on the board for the last few years, you know we've gone through and hired several new nurses. So it seemed like every year we've been bringing on some new ones. And it's not just, welcome to your health office and good luck. It's, staying with them for a little bit to learn what the role of a school nurse is, because a lot of them have been hospital-based nurses, and it is a little bit different coming into the schools and understanding what we do here. So she's been a great support to all of the nursing team. So we do have 6 in-district nurses. We know we like data, and I was like, so we did put out a survey, mostly to our Questar-based schools. So again, we're on the larger side of that. Every school is structured differently. We have different enrollments. So I was kind of struggling a little bit how can we make sense of the data? What I did decide down to is doing the student to nurse ratio to see if we can get some comparable numbers. And I found at the elementary level, we were very similar to most of the schools around us. We definitely were on the higher end at the secondary level. And while here it looks like, our high school ratio is a little over 600 because it's one full-time nurse and a little bit more of another nurse. But a lot of times there's 900 students in the high school and there's one nurse there by herself. The National Association of School Nurses makes a recommendation of ratio of 750 to 1. So yeah, 600 looks like we're under that national ratio, but again, I also know that a lot of times it's 900 to 1, and that is definitely on the high side. What I did realize as we were looking through the data is, again, while elementary is pretty much one nurse per building across the region, when we get to the secondary schools who are more of our size, they have more than one nurse, 2, little more than 2, definitely more than what we are supporting, both our middle school and high schools. For example, Columbia has more than 2 nurses at their middle school and their high school. So if you look at that particular school. So we're definitely on the lower side in district with nursing coverage, but they do a great job with the staff that we have. Moving forward, we do have an increased need at the Parker School. When we had determined our support out to them, they had fewer students. They have about doubled their population since we had set our nursing time out there. So what we're recommending is that we do a 0.6 FTE, 3 days a week, increase to Parker School. With a private school and all students coming from many different districts, we do bill back those districts for the cost of the nursing service. Carrie always says stay in your lane, so I'm not getting into financials for that. But I do know we bill back and we would be supported by the other districts through the department. The other benefit to that is instead of that other 6 nurse that we have going out to Parker during the week, she'd be able to stay within the district to provide support to any of our 5 buildings and be give a little bit more time here, and again, reducing that student to nurse ratio. That is a little bit high in our, certainly on our secondary end. So that's really our piece about nurses. We are asking for an increase for Parker. Questions?
No question, just want to point out, our nursing staff, especially at the high school, does a fantastic job.
Absolutely.
Just absolutely very pleased and feel very safe with the care that they provide our students.
We're extremely lucky with the nurses that we have. All right, guess I got one of these.
I just also want to say thank you because the staff has been stretched really thin, so I think this is going to be helpful to them to be able to, take care of some stuff I think that has gone unattended. So I appreciate it, thank you.
Can I just, this might be for Carrie, just to clarify, that sharing the cost, so it's like, it's a minimal cost to us, not a zero cost to us. It's still not the full cost of what it is, but it's.
Right, because we do bill back all those health and welfare contracts we put to the board, those are all to cover the cost of the Parker School.
But does that cover the full cost of what we're gonna incur by increasing the 0.6?
No, not fully, because we have students that are over there too, so those get taken into account.
Right.
And it's a per pupil expenditure, and we count our pupils that are attend here and the ones at the private school and blend them together, so it's not full, but it'll help.
Thanks. All right, Jim. Thank you, Kate.
Welcome.
Thank you, Kate. So, thank you for the opportunity to present the recommended budget to the Board of Education. And thank you to Sarah and to Heath and to Kate for coming tonight. Again, wanted to provide the board with a little bit of background and context as we headed into this presentation. It is a little bit lengthy and there's a lot of detail in it. It builds on the presentations that have been done by Carrie and the earlier instructional one. And it is really, I think, in my humble opinion, a really, really good budget. Given what the hand we were dealt, which was a $1.6 million deficit, we are looking to address some longstanding issues and needs in the district, and we think we came up with a plan that is really positive. And I'd like to thank the administrative team for their hard work in getting to this point. It has not been easy. The conversations and the process, not a simple one or an easy one, but we are fortunate that we have a team that works really well together and does not get territorial in terms of protecting their own, and also, in all honesty, thanks to the board as well, because your support and trust in the administrative team is hugely important because it allows us to have conversations based on what is best and not as what we think we have to say or we have to recommend, but what is truly the best thing for our students. So that does have important ramifications, and I know Jesse's talked a lot about that over time with that stability and support of the board. It bleeds itself into a lot of areas, and this is one where it really does. So thank you. And this isn't just to get your applause at the end, but thank you for your support.
So you're laying it on pretty thick tonight.
Yeah. And that's it. It really isn't 58 slides. It was just. So as we have done in the past, we want to start with our goals and mission statement. Nothing new for you. Graduating college and career ready, productively engaging in our school community, and being digitally fluent. As we always kind of reference here, we used to have data as being one of our goals, but we've pushed that aside because we've internalized that as just something we do. And of course, everyone knows the mission statement of meeting the needs of and creating opportunities for every student every day. Some of us even have the tattoo. So our guiding principles are here. Again, we've talked about these for many years. We want the budget to be the representation in a financial form of our academic program in terms of what we value. We want the goals to drive how we utilize our limited funds and resources. And we need both financial and human when we talk about that. Data is the key, and hopefully that is something that the board has come to understand that we really do value and base our decisions on. Where possible, reducing through attrition, a key principle that we have used for, this is now my 7th, 8th year coming up. So we've been doing this for a while, and it's that ability and that decision to reduce through attrition where possible, which has allowed us to be in the position we're in and not worse. We have made an effort to reduce in as least painful ways as possible. The last two were added recently, right? Last year, where reasonable, we'll make reductions, and where reasonable, we'll use our fund balance and reserves on the basis that, hey, we have this savings and we need to use it when appropriate in order to not decimate the program, but as you're going to see in this budget, where we feel like we have an opportunity to actually improve the program. I want you to start thinking in terms of how we frame this. We spent a lot of time trying to work through this, that there are two very distinct sides of the house, and it's easy to blend them and get confused in them, but we want you to think about them as two very distinct things. There's a financial side and the instructional side. Let's call the financial side Carrie, and let's call the instructional side Matt. Those two sides are very different, right? So these numbers kind of blend and they overlap, but you need to really kind of think of them as two separate things because of how we do stuff. If you think about the work that Matt has done, the work that Carrie's done, and the work Kim does supporting that, those are very different pieces. And when we look at FTE and where the money's coming from and where it's going, they have different meanings to both sides. On the financial side, we're going to look at three things: expenses, revenue, and our fund balance. So taking a look at our expenses. We know that we have a benefits slide every year, and we know every year this is a painful one. It's not that bad this year, right? You can see TRS, a decrease, small. in terms of dollars, $2,600. That is very good. Sometimes that goes up quite a bit, and that is something that we can't control. ERS, which is our employee contribution rate, we did have an increase, and that has some real dollars attached to it in terms of 145,000, but still, in the world of employee benefits, not a bad year, right? And I'm gonna kind of say that a few times because we have a lot of things that broke our way in this budget. That is one as we go forward. This is one that did not, right? So if you look at health insurance, and we've talked a little bit with the board about this, we are in a consortium, we work, it's got 20 plus districts, tons of employees. This is something we focus a lot on. We have no real control over it, and you can kind of skip through all that and get that bottom line. The increase for health insurance, budget to budget, is $1.2 million. It is a huge number, it's an enormous number, and that has repercussions to a district like ours in particular that is really struggling to put pieces together to make things work. Looking at our budget numbers by these categories, we used to, in previous years, go through this in a little more detail. We tried to simplify it for you so you can see it kind of larger scale. And really the key here is if you look at those two numbers in the top right corner. About 77% of our budget is tied up in salaries and benefits. Not a surprise, not out of the norm. Education is a people business. The average is always in that 75, 80% range. That's where we are. Nothing good, bad, or otherwise. It's just the facts of the business. Salaries and benefits. So when you're looking to add or subtract, it has to come from salaries and benefits, right? We're past the old saying of, we'll get out of this through double siding our copies. That is not how you get out of budget issues in education. Now the revenue side. Very good news. Things going our way. The tax cap at 2.41 is extremely in our favor. There was times we thought this number was going to be over 4. We thought it might be in the high 4s. We got it down. We thought it was going to be just under. But when you look at it, and again, we kind of talked about it when Carrie did her presentation, it's not as simple just pumping a bunch of numbers. We had to do a lot of factoring because we have now not 1 but 2 capital projects out there. And there's a repercussion to those and how we fund those and the impact it has and how we plan now and going forward. We are very fortunate in a good spot at 2.41%. We want to get that as low as possible. That is at the tax cap limit, and that is what we are recommending to the board to go out at. You can see the revenue increase, $871,000, or about 2/3 of our health insurance increase. So when you think about that, right, all the money that we're going to get in our tax cap is going to be far less than just the amount we have to pay for our health insurance. Something that clearly broke our way, and this is the only time all presentation where you're going to see a reference, not the only time, one of the only times, to 24-25 or prior to this year. Last year, we were a hold harmless district, a $0 increase. For whatever reason this year, on formula, they made a couple tweaks. We know what those tweaks were. There were slight increases for us, but they led to a huge benefit. That 5.96 number is a new one for you. We previously told you it was 6.25. That is now 5.96. There was another database run that came out, the February database. So this is the up-to-the-minute projection at what we're looking at. Again, this will depend on what the state legislature comes back with. We believe, we hope that they're going to put more money in education. But, and I think the people who were at Lobby Day would probably agree with me on this, what we heard was if more money is put into education, it's probably going to go to those hold harmless districts, the group that was where we were last year. So I don't honestly foresee us getting more. Fortunately, I don't see us getting less either. But that 5.96 is where we believe we'll be. Our total foundation aid being just short of 19 million. And a key number, it's about 28% of our revenue. So when we talk about the importance of foundation aid and hold harmless and all these things going out at the state level, more than a quarter of our dollars comes solely from foundation aid. We always want to show you the state aid projections and where we are budget to budget. The key number here, as we've talked about in the past, is that one there. Don't worry too much about building aid and the reimbursable aids. That is just sort of how the whole system works. The more you spend, the more you get reimbursed the following year. So those are driven on a bunch of things. They go up, they go down. The big number there is the foundation aid increase of over $1 million. One change that we are going to do A few years ago, we went to not charging our outside groups for their use of the facility. We are going to recommend to you tonight that the board, that we start charging outside groups solely for the weekend custodian. We're still not gonna charge them for use of facilities. It's something we decided a few years ago that we believe our taxpayers bought, paid for, and maintain these facilities. So to charge them again seemed to us to be not appropriate. The board supported that. We've been doing it now for a few years. We still strongly believe that. And when you're using the facilities in the evening, for example, if you were doing something here tonight, if there was a basketball practice at Algonquin by one of our community groups, we already have a custodian there, right? We have night custodians doing the work. We don't even charge for that, right? We are, I believe, anecdotally, not normal when it comes to that. Most places charge. We are among the ones that don't. I think more have moved to this model, to be honest. The one thing we are going to recommend, and it's not a huge revenue generator, but for those groups that are using the buildings on the weekends, we are going to ask them to pay for the custodian going forward. Because if you're down at Algonquin from 8 to 8 on Saturday, we don't need to have a custodian there. The only reason there's a custodian there is because the facility is using the group. That makes sense? Usually Algonquin and the high school are the two buildings that get used the most on the weekend. Small change, but an appropriate change. We may have to tweak the policy at some point. We looked at the regulation and changing the numbers and making sure the amount we want to charge them is okay. But a small little change there. Excuse me. I'll apologize now one time for the nagging cough. The revenue without fund balance and reserves. So if you look at this, the key number there is that 2.8, 2.9 really number in the bottom right corner. That is the gap. So if you remember this last year, you kind of remember we did the slide like this, that grayed out bar, we're going to fill that in as we go forward. But right now, you look at our budget, $2.8 million, $2.9 million is the gap that we have. That is where we're going to need to use some fund balance and reserves. So let's talk about fund balance and reserves. This is a little bit confusing and a little bit deep. We went over this many times to try and make it transparent and informative. Here's the good thing. It's really good news. It's going to seem weird because we don't usually start fund balance and reserve slides with really good news. But we are going to support the budget with the same level of fund balance and reserves in this coming budget as we have now. Remember last year we told you we were going to increase that. We talked about a deficit budget type thing and spending down numbers. I know Jesse Fiore, you've asked a lot of times about when's the money going to run out. We talked a lot about that last year. Our plan is to support the budget. The keyword there is support with the same level, fund balance and reserves. Well, why is that? So if you look here, we took the February 25 balance. We have about $4.7 million in operating reserves. Last year, we told you, if you add this up, it's just shy of $1 million. So I'm going to round it and say it's $1 million. That we are going to use $1 million in operating reserves. That's what we budgeted. That was our projected. What we are telling you tonight, that we are projecting the actual 24-25 spend to be zero. Remember, that money is there because we need it to be there to balance the budget in case, and just as a holding to make sure we can balance if we need to when things happen. We're going to get into this in the future slides. The good news here is we are projecting to use zero. What does that mean? Well, think of it this way. That column, that chart gets shifted one column to the right. So to answer the question, when's the money going to run out? It's now a year further out. And remember, we said to you last year, these are all worst case scenario, right? This is of the worst, if the baddest news happens, that's the money we're going to spend. When you go to the unassigned fund balance, that's the one you always hear about, that 4% max. More good news. We told you we were going to spend 1.6 last year. We are now projecting zero. So that's another big number. What does that do? Keeps these numbers stable and pushes this out 1 year. Makes sense so far? Now, if I was you, I'd be thinking, well, how is that possible? Right?
That's what I'm thinking.
There you go. So, we talked about those numbers being worst case scenario. What actually happened, thankfully, is best case scenario. The simple answer is we did not use them because revenues went in the right direction, which is up, and expenses went in the right direction, which is down. Why did that happen? The number one driver there on the revenue side is interest, right? Just like when you have your money in your bank account at home or you're playing the stock market, you can't count on those things always going up or always returning a certain percentage. When we budgeted for interest, it was a small number. We had a very good year of interest, which increased our revenue significantly. That's a good thing. Not something you can count on forever, but we then have an adjustment to make in this budget where we're increasing that number. We also increased our tuitions. Those are coming from Little Red and Wynenskill. Fortunately, we're doing well in terms of kids coming here from the districts that have choice. FEMA recovery is a one-shot thing. Goes back to the flood? COVID. We got money back from FEMA. That was a process that we went through. We finally got that money. Expenses down, vacant positions. Not by choice. We have less bus drivers than we want. We have less custodial than we want. That brought our expenses down. After the budget done, we had some people who retired, so we had breakage on that. We've adjusted our legal fees down. We have our special education placements that went down, and our benefits, because of all the breakage and all that stuff, also had a trickle-down effect that was in the right direction. So, now if I was you, I'd be thinking, well, wait a minute. You said you were going to use $1 million, and then you said you're going to use 1.6, and you magically did it, right? Sounds like you didn't do a good job. And you really would be talking about Carrie. But she did do a good job. That's more good news. Here's why, and this slide is important. Those guidelines are from our auditors, and the audit committee knows it. Your year-end expenses, they want you to be between 95 to 97% of your budget. Just like in your home, you don't want to spend 100% of your income. That would be bad. The comptroller, or the auditor, tells us 95 to 97. That means you're going to have 3 to 5% of your budget remaining at the end of the year. Well, there's our current expense projection right there. 3% under budget, which means, since it was good, I'll say we budgeted 97% of our expenses to budget, which means it's exactly where we want it to be. So the number is big, right? We just told you 1.6 million and 1 million, and oh my God, that sounds delinquent and disingenuous, and how could they do that? No, it's a big number, but it's a small percentage because our budget this year is going to be, well, this one was 66, this one's going to be $69 million. So the expenses are right in line where they should be. And then we told you we did well on the revenue side. Well, it's not like we did 25% better. We did, that exact number was 1.94. So we were just under 2% over budget on the revenue side. Not a big number. Comes out to be a helpful number, though, when we're trying to put this together. When you get to the bottom number there, the differential between our expenses and our revenue, still projected because this is for June of 25, is $858,000. That means we should be on the good side, $850,000. That would be money that we then allocate towards reserves going forward, if it is still there, right? That funds your capital reserve, it funds those other reserves. If things take a turn for the worse, right, so still have a few months, or if things were not going so well, past tense, then that's where you get into, you'd be going into that fund balance and that reserve to close that gap. And that 97% would be 97.5, or 98, or 98.5%. And that's when you're getting into taking that fund balance out and those reserves out. And that's when you get into the worst case scenario, which is you spend every dollar of fund balance reserve, and then it gets down to zero, and then we eventually go bankrupt. So the news is good. The numbers are good. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So 24, 25 to 25, 26. You can see what we're looking to do in terms of our fund balance and our planned use of reserves. The gray area here is filled in from the previous chart. About 3.75%. That is the number we've been trying to stick around. Last year was 3.9, if I remember correctly. So we're trying to push that revenue fund balance reserve number as high as possible without it being dangerous, right? Obviously, you don't want that to add up to 10%, right? But if you get that lower, then you're cutting, and last year we made the case to you, we're decimating program when we have money we could be spending. So it's the balance between how much do you want to spend, and how much do you want to save, and how much program do you want to have, and how much do you want to not have. This is the compromise that we've come up with, the putting all the pieces together. That is the financial side. Do you want me to pause and go through that, or keep going on the instructional side? We always go back to it. We're here all night, so we got plenty of time to. Yep.
I just have one question related to the sort of current questionable economic status and if there is any potential impact on, like, you know, that's where we are right now, but, you know, how much volatility is involved with those projections?
That's a great question. I was thinking about asking Carrie tonight myself.
Oh, well, there you go.
Carrie?
The projections in terms of the state aid or just the overall revenues?
Both.
So state aid, I think, for at least for next year, I think it's fairly stable that where they came out with projections. And with the interest, I didn't bump it all the way up to the maximum of where we are, but I made an incremental increase. So because you don't know, right? A couple of years ago when I first started, we made $12,000 in interest, right? So I think you have to be like mindful that if you're balancing a budget on such a volatile, revenue line, then that's not good practice either. So I bumped it up incrementally, but I didn't put it up to where we actually are this year, because I think that would be not smart going forward, because then as soon as interest rates start dropping, you have to cut that line, and then you're cutting program again. So we tried to do it in a balanced way.
To piggyback on that, also remember the stock market volatility impacts us, because that's when you get to that benefit slide with TRS and ERS. So as the market goes up or down, our contribution rate gets factored into that, because we get that number from TRS and ERS. That's all based on stock market performance. So I know today was not a good day from what I heard on the market. So when you talk about, again, projecting things out, that's when you get yourself in a TRS percentage increase, which then our number goes up, and that affects our budget. So when I say things went well this year, there's a lot of factors allowed us to get to this part. All right? Yep.
So I voiced it in our other meeting, but I'll voice it again. I don't like the 1.2 million increase. I would like to figure out a way we can either lobby against, figure out something to try to work towards not having that 10% increase every single year in health insurance. That's going to kill us every year in our budget, and it's just throwing money out. So I would happily work with you guys on trying to lobby or figure out a way where we can at least make our voices heard about not agreeing to it.
Excuse me, thank you. And we completely agree with that. All right, we'll move on to the instructional side. All right, so we told you we had a $1.6 million deficit. That was the rollover, right? So we do something here called a modified rollover, where we take what we have this year and we roll over to the following year. And without factoring anything out, what will that gap be? We know there's going to be a gap. How bad is it? Factor in some things with what we were getting in aid, all that stuff. We came up with the number 1.6. So we set ourselves some objectives. In the elementary, we wanted to do three things: improve the student-teacher ratio, maintain our AS teachers, improve the delivery model in special education. Those are three things that we set out to do in a perfect world. Middle school, and we're going to talk more about these coming up. In the middle school, the number one thing we wanted to do, as I kind of mentioned already, Algonquin is going to go through decreasing enrollment. We want to maintain a teaming structure. Don't want to have a complex discussion about tonight, but want to make sure you're aware of something that's very important. Middle schools are more expensive to run than junior high schools. Algonquin is a middle school, and it's been one for 50 plus years. That costs money because you have teachers that are teamed in their grade levels. It's cheaper to go to a junior high model where teachers are teaching across grade levels, your kids aren't teamed. Not a discussion for tonight, but it's something that we've already talked to the middle school about, like, how do we maintain that going forward, right? It's a big, big thing. Our number one goal there was to keep Algonquin in the teaming structure. It's something we have believed here in this district for a long time, decades and decades, and we want to make sure that we are protecting that as best as possible. At the high school, maintaining pathways for students. Really, it's one word, electives, right? So how do you increase or maintain pathways? You need electives for students. Those were the objectives we had there. So how do we go about trying to figure this out? Well, Sarah already did a great job explaining to you the co-taught model. 2 teachers in a classroom reduces the student to teacher ratio. It's better for all students, both special ed and gen ed. She's going to provide some research on that. We'll get that to you. But in general, here's what we know. For special education students, it's easier and more likely for them to exit out of it. For general education students, there's a less chance that they're going to get classified as special ed. What does that mean? You saw this implementation, grades 2 through 5, all 3 elementary schools. Important to note, not every classroom is going to be co-taught, right? So in a grade, and we have lots of slides coming up, but a grade level has multiple sections. In those sections, or in that grade level, not every section is going to be co-taught. It's going to be co-taught and not co-taught. We're going to go through that in a minute. So how do we do that? The co-taught is going to require the addition of 3 teachers. This goes back to Lauren's question about how are you paying for it, which goes back to Adam's question of when I said we wanted to get there last year and we couldn't. We did not want to, which goes back to Megan's question, we did not want to start something without the ability to continue it. And we got very close. It was the 11th hour, we sat there cabinet, and we decided to pull the plug on this because we didn't know at the time or didn't believe that we'd be able to sustain the co-taught model. We now believe we can, and we've made some changes to make sure we can, or projecting that we can going forward. There's a middle school special ed retirement. We are going to repurpose that one and reassign it to the elementary school. It's a new hire going to the elementary. There are 2 classroom teachers at the elementary level that are retiring. We're going to replace them with special education teachers. So there's 3 additional teachers. The net increase is 1 because 2 gen ed are going to become sped ed. This is where I get into the financial side, the instructional side, and not trying to make it too confusing, but also be transparent and let you know what we're really thinking. The net increase, the pure number of bodies at the elementary school is a +1. They are a winner in this model. Where is it coming from? Well, we are going to have to pay for it somehow. And the way that we are planning on paying for it is through the reduction of aides. So those aides, one of them is needs-based. 5 are going to come through the change in the model. There are less aides needed in a special education model where it's co-taught. So this, in our case, 5. And then reducing the library aides, which are the aides that are assigned to the elementary building libraries. We're also going to reassign teaching assistants, 2 from Algonquin to the elementary level. We've talked a lot with Algonquin, the elementary folks, and with Sarah at Third Division. We want the teaching assistants down at the elementary level. We believe that's where they are best utilized. We are also going to move 1 aide into a teaching assistant position. That's an important bullet because we believe strongly here that the people are more important than the program. We have a class that's working extremely well, that it's because of the people. One of those persons is an aide and is going to move into a TA position. We encourage the person to do so. They want to do it. We're excited about that. That's a positive development as that person kind of is growing through the organization. So there's a reduction total of 9 aides that are going to help pay for the increase in the FTE needed to justify or pay for the model. Yeah.
Michelle has a question.
So am I understanding this, we're getting rid of 9 bodies to get 3, or no?
Yeah, that's a fair statement, if you look at it that way. 9 aides, 3 teachers. I think that's a fair statement, right? We're going to go through that in more detail. So, this slide we're putting back up there. Probably moaning and groaning because it's in there every year. But we want to show the movement from 2021 to 25, 26. For those who've been on the board for that span, we have talked about the reduction of our AIS teachers. We were at 9, we thought we were gonna go to 6, we thought we were gonna go, that's why it's in red, to 3, and then potentially 3, and who knows what number, right? As we were looking at the number in the budget, how low was that gonna get to? We have been able to maintain the AIS teachers. Again, database decision, we know the data is good. People, not programs, we know the people are good. We know it's working. We invested into that. If you go back to last year's presentation, that was stimulus money because we separated it out and we used the stimulus money to pay for it. We brought that back into the general fund. That was part of the reason the budget increase last year was so high. We are staying with that. So now we're going to go through some context and assumptions on this elementary model. The first bullet is literally the copy and paste of the principle. Where possible, we're reducing staff through attrition. So the sub-bullet is really important. The 2 general education teacher retirements were not going to be replaced. Following our principle to reduce through attrition where we could, when you looked at the class sizes that we had there, we were not going to, if we were using the same logic, we are not going to be able to justify rehiring 2 general ed teachers to replace the 2 that were going out. So you got to start that as your context and your assumption. Those 2 spots were gone. That said, the district, and I think this is a sincere and important thing, understood the concern that we were hearing regarding class sizes, right, from faculty and from parents. So we understood that concern. So, okay, we're trying to mix things that don't necessarily go together. You don't have the money to pay for it. You don't have a number that you can justify really getting another teacher and reducing section sizes to a number that we can't sustain, but you're concerned about class size. So I don't like to put a lot of words on the screen, and I don't like to read them to you. I'm going to break both of those rules here because this is important. Reduced student-teacher ratio. We are changing the term from class size to student-teacher ratio. Not a game, not a smoke and mirrors. It's black and white. Student-teacher ratio can only be accomplished by moving to a co-teaching model. And if I was clever, these 3 bullets would be like the recycling diagram of like reduce, reuse, and recycle, where they all feed on each other, because they all play on the other one. The co-teaching model allows the district to reduce the number of aides. Co-teaching means you can have less aides. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the savings on the aides is what's going to allow us to replace the gen ed teachers with special education teachers. That's to Michelle's point of 9 for 3. Now, the additional special education teacher that you hired allows the district to implement co-teaching. And again, if I was clever, there'd be like an error or something going back to that first bullet saying, and co-teaching allows you to reduce number of aides. And that cycle plays itself out. So it's sort of, if you like it, a perfect equation. If you don't like it, it's a very not perfect equation. But this came to what we thought was best in terms of those objectives. Reduce the student-teacher ratio, improve the delivery model. Questions?
Michelle.
That was a lot. This is obviously an emotional.
Buzz around out, it was 3 seconds, you're out of time.
I'm already out of time.
So I guess I go back to the special education, and I know like we just have to trust that you guys are doing the right thing, but it seems like how are you gonna pick and choose which class is getting that additional support teacher and which class is not? Like, are you gonna put all of the, I just wanna make sure that we're not stressing out those teachers in the class and just to give them another extra teacher to pacify the situation. Like, I guess I just wanted to make sure that everybody is on board and everybody feels comfortable with changing that direction. I mean, it seems like a big change. And my concern, or I guess off the top of my head, is the fact that we don't do it K1, but then we're gonna do it 2 through 5, but then we're gonna go back to 6. Like, if it's such a great model, I guess I'm just like, there's some pieces that just feel like not mixing well together. I don't know, like, and maybe it's just because I don't like change and there's a lot of change right now. I don't know, like, that's a lot of, I guess, emotion for you to hear and take in, not necessarily a question, other than if it is such a great model, what makes it not great in K1 and what makes it not great in 6, I guess, is like the big question.
I think that's all very real and very true. It is a big change, and I understand how those things don't match in some ways, some jive. Remember, with K, it's hard because the kids are coming to us still, so we don't know exactly what's coming to us in K. And in first grade, if you look at it, we don't think we have the numbers to justify doing the model, the special education numbers. So that is a database decision. It's not to say we won't at some point go that way,
Okay.
right? In terms of the middle school, again, not sure we're there yet, and it's something we thought we'd start here 2.5 and then ideally roll up. I'm hoping to stand before you next year and say that co-teaching is going to move up, right? This worked well 2 through 5, and they're going to follow up. We have the money to do it, we have the support to do it, we have the buy-in to do it, and it's all part of the plan. We didn't want to bite off more than we could chew and go 2.6 or 2.7 or 2.8. Seemed like a little bit of a bridge too far. It already is enough change. And we didn't have the numbers to justify in 1, and K is just a giant, big unknown. And your point about yes, where there's going to be a lot of time and energy and effort in making sure your other point about the distribution of students in classes, right? Mm-hmm. And that's coming up here at some point. Building level discussions. Sarah, fortunately, we stole her and we were lucky she's here. She's done it as an administrator. She's done it as a teacher, right? So we like those type of things. The Help Me app we just brought in. We're fortunate we had Evan, who did it in his previous district, one of the high school assistant principals. Always nice to do stuff that people have already done. In this case, Sarah's done this. So we have belief that we'll be able to do it here and do it well, learning from her experience, both in the classroom and as an administrator doing it. And the admin team supports it as well. So I think we're all kind of on board, but that concern is clearly on our mind. And there's some slides coming up that's going to show you the numbers a little bit. So that might clear it up for you a little bit too.
And Jim, maybe you can assist Sarah in making sure that we see the studies that show that co-teaching is effective for both the gen ed students and the special ed students.
Yeah, getting you those studies.
This could be anecdotal, but maybe not. I know that we didn't have the amount of bus drivers we wanted over the course of the year, but oftentimes when I saw those emails, it also seemed like we were struggling at times to fill aid positions. So I'm wondering if that was your impression as well, and this sort of shift might help, to account for that in a different way.
That is a great observation on your part. Yeah, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that as we go forward with those 9 aid reductions. Mm-hmm. So yes, and hold on to a little bit, because I think a little bit of that coming up, but that's yes.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to reiterate a point that was made earlier about co-teaching. Well, yes, we look forward to hearing those studies, and that is going to be helpful in us understanding and supporting this initiative. I do know, just in terms of studies as a social worker across the board, that any time that we help the most marginalized or people with the largest barriers in our communities across the board, that raises the level of success, civic engagement, and all other things for those of us who don't have those struggles. So there's a great body of evidence to support that idea that the rising tides lifts all ships. Though I know we'll see more of those studies.
I've spent a lot of time in the special education community as a parent of a special education student, and I can tell you that the consultant teacher model definitely has challenges at the middle and the high school programming perspective. I am super interested to see what those research studies show and to see what program implementation could be at the middle school and high school level to provide additional support for the special education students who I think definitely struggle with that support, in terms of accessing, our special education administrators and teachers, by the way, they do an amazing job. That is not what I'm saying at all. I just know that there are challenges that are introduced that are sometimes hard to address at the middle school and high school level, that I would be interested to see if this co-teaching model, if implemented at that secondary level, would solve those problems and gain better accessibility to services and lack of otherism, the way Lauren had mentioned it. So yeah, I want to hear more about how we could potentially build upon that. We have a pretty large propensity for special ed students, and I believe we have quite a few students who are undiagnosed and unaddressed that fall into that AIS category, just based on what I know from my personal experience. So I am glad that we're moving in a direction to provide services that are universal across the board. I think for a lot of special ed kids, it's not a black and white thing. They call it a spectrum for a reason. So it's important to bear in mind that there's a variety of challenges that we don't necessarily see every day.
I agree. Sorry for the distraction. We're getting these systems going to shut down in 5 minutes.
Oh, no. Well, you only get 20 slides.
I know. We're just beginning. I mean, well, figure out what happens when that shuts down on us. So, class size and student-teacher ratio projections. So here's some more assumptions and context for the following projections that you're going to see. It's based on the March 2025 data right now. It adjusts for the number of special education students in a room, right? So you don't have that in these slides, but some rooms have a larger number of special education students than others. These are just estimates, and they're subject to building level discussions, students coming in and out. And kindergarten is not included because we don't have solid data on that. You may have noticed we've been trying to encourage folks to register earlier this year. We've sent out now 4 emails, one a month since December, to try and get that going. They can register whatever, but we want to get those numbers in as early as possible. Based on what we know now, we are projecting 3 sections of kindergarten in each building.
Hey, Jim, just real quick. Overall enrollment is slightly down, but the percentage of special ed, obviously we don't know from K yet, but 1, 2 is a higher percentage of special ed in the past couple of years. Is that, am I correct? Do we know that?
I don't know.
You don't know that.
For those grades specifically, I don't know. As a district, yes.
As it just, yeah, that's fine, that's sufficient. Okay, that's what I thought. So go ahead.
All right. So, here's your first grade projections. Remember, we said we are not doing the co-taught model in first grade. So those student-teacher ratios are literally just the teacher to the kids, right? Pretty simple. You can see the number of sections in each building, Miller Hill, Post-Acute, West Sand Lake, left to right, and the number of students in a section, and then the ratio. 2019, and then the 22, 23. Going to grade 2, you get to the projections for the first grade that we have co-teaching. If you look at that section 1, so you got 28 kids. The highest number you're going to see of students in a room is 28 at any of the grade levels. So your student-teacher ratio there is 14-1. The other class section, for example, Miller Hill in grade 2 would be a 25-1. And if you go across the Post-and-Kill, there's your co-taught room, the ratio being 13-1. That's the non-co-taught room, obviously. Or West Sand Lake, there's your co-taught, and then here's your non. So again, if you're looking for student-teacher ratio, obviously it's going to be higher in the non-co-taught rooms. There's 1 adult. If you're looking for a number of bodies, it's going to be higher in the co-taught room because you're reducing the ratio.
Jim?
Yep.
Is the second teacher also certified and the same as the primary teacher? So if we're doing 2-1, are we saying they're the same level? The certifications that we need.
There's no primary teacher in the co-taught method. I think that we're losing sight of that. It is co-teaching. It's not a primary and a secondary. They're equal.
So it
They
is,
might have different, I mean, you can answer a question, but I think we just need to understand that nuance because I think it's important.
Yes. There are two teachers in the room. They're both certified teachers.
so it's almost as if like they could each have their own classroom.
One's a gen ed certified teacher, one is a special ed certified teacher. They're two certified teachers.
But one is gen ed and one is
Special
special
ed.
ed.
And the model for the second classroom, specifically concerned about the larger sizes for the second classroom, there will still be an aide in that class? Or what support for the teacher that does not have the co-taught class model?
There would not be an aide in those classrooms. Well.
It depends on the students.
That's
So
the students.
in this particular case, at second grade at Miller Hill, we have a 15-1 program. So those students do, for some times of their day, will go back into that classroom and may, depending on the kid, have an aide with them. But a large portion of their day is spent in the 15-1 classroom, so that, in this case, that 25 is actually 23 for a majority of the day. And those students do go back for homeroom, science and social studies, again, differs for child to child, but they would also potentially have an aide with them, so.
Okay, I'm digesting, go ahead.
Excuse me. Grade 3. So again, the highest number you'll see is 28 in the co-taught, again, the ratio to 14. Here it's a 24, again, the ratio to 12. And then the non-co-taught sections, see the numbers here of 21, 22, and 19.
Jim, this is my admitted ignorance of the special education realm. But I guess what I'm trying to understand is, so the kids that are now coming into the co-taught room prior to this method were not in the mainstream classroom, they were in a separate special education classroom?
No, they were in the mainstream classroom, they just had a consultant teacher instead of the co-taught model.
So for portions of the day?
Core subjects.
Yeah, they had a consultant. There was a consultant teacher who was going into the general ed classroom for portions of the day.
Yes.
To help groups of kids or one kid?
Depends on who's in the class.
They're there to support the special ed students.
Yeah.
That's what they're consulting and pushing in for.
But now,
But in general, okay,
under co-taught, they're gonna all support all students? Or the
correct.
special ed is gonna focus on the 5 special ed and the general is gonna focus on the 23 regular?
They would
No.
all be working on it.
No,
Now, I encourage you to go back, think about what Sarah talked about earlier, which is
Right.
that they're sharing that responsibility for all kids. So that's why we're showing an even number. It's not 23 and 5, it's 14-1 in theory that both teachers have an equal responsibility for all kids. You have 2 adults in the room to share that responsibility. Under a consultant model, they're going in, and if you remember what Sarah said, the classroom teacher, the regular teacher, has the responsibility for delivering instruction, and that consultant teacher is supporting just whatever special ed students are under their caseload in the current model. So this changes that mindset quite a bit.
Okay. I think this is just a really unfamiliar concept, so it's hard for me to understand how this is gonna work and how it's gonna be beneficial to the gen ed kids. Mostly because I need to think more about what this is gonna look like. I'm not as familiar with this concept.
They're all there.
So picture a bigger class
They're all there.
with more teachers.
However, are we to assume then that all special ed students will be allotted to the co-teaching classroom versus the non-co-teaching classroom? So the co-teaching classroom could potentially have a higher ratio of special education students to general education students?
not all the special education students will be in the co-teaching room.
Okay, so then the consultant teacher model will still be used in the non-co-teaching room?
No,
So how do we support
any
those
consultant,
special
any consultant teacher student would be in a co-teaching classroom altogether. The only ones that potentially would be if they were in a 15-1 program, or potentially a 6-1 program. It depends, the students that are in more of a self-contained program may push it to the other classroom for a smaller part of their day. But if they are a current consultant student, they would be in a co-taught classroom with all the consultant students together, and they would have 2 educators in that room.
So what about AIS? You're still gonna pull students in and out?
Yes.
Yeah, so it would, I mean, like, in summary too, I think it would depend on what kind of, even if a child has an IEP or a 504, what they need in that plan is different. So I think what they're saying is if their plan states this child needs a consultant teacher, they would be moving into the co-model. But if there are other students that have 504s, IEPs that need services, like, for example, some kids get occupational therapy, physical therapy, check-ins with the school counselor, that wouldn't necessarily mean that those kids need consulting and or co-teaching. Does that make sense? So it's like a needs-based as well amongst those who are identified as needing additional services.
Have other districts locally, how many other districts locally have done this?
Don't forget, you said it's recommended by state.
That's not me.
We should have steroids.
Yes.
Everybody?
Yeah, everyone is, do we want to take, let me get through the presentation, because there's a lot of non-co-taught stuff in here. So the goal was to do the co-taught stuff earlier. And if you still have co-taught questions, then I think maybe, since Sarah didn't leave, which is her fault, we could bring Sarah back up, because you're asking good questions.
Well, now
I
you're
don't
seeing
want-
it in application, I think that's why,
What's that?
now we're seeing it in application, so
Right.
that's why we're.
So I don't want to discount the questions, I don't want to answer them incorrectly, but we don't want to have an audience engagement session either.
We can circle back.
So I think if, let me get through the presentation, if that's all right with you, and then we can go back and answer questions. Maybe you have a nursing question, we can ask Kate. Figure that out. All right. And the flashing 5 minutes thing didn't happen, so that's good news too, because that was making me nervous, but it looks like we're all set. So class size 3rd grade, class size 4th grade, again, 27 here, 24, there's your co-taught, 28, nothing bigger than 28, we said. Again, these are all just projected, a lot of stuff to be discussed and figured out. And 5th grade, again, here we are, bigger numbers at Miller Hill, 28, 26. 14 is the ratio there. 28, the ratio here of 14:1. Poston Hill's got the 3 sections based on numbers, so smaller numbers, there's your co-taught.
Just a quick question.
Yep.
So you have a 26:1 ratio, which is pretty high. Is there anything physically or something preventing you from migrating some of those kids into the larger class that has a much lower ratio?
Absolutely nothing keeping that from happening, and that's gonna be part of that discussion that happens later on. Again, this is the March projection. There's gonna be kids that come in, kids that come out, kids with IEPs, not IEPs. We kept it at 28, so we had some flexibility up and down, but we certainly could get that to be 29 or 30 maybe, and then drop to 25 or 24, if that's what's decided. This whole thing is not long. This has been in the really, the decision was made, what, a week and a half ago now, whatever it's been. So we're still fleshing out a lot of the details of it. Yeah.
Thanks.
So, wait, sorry, one more question on that one, not related to co-teaching. I know we've talked in the past about concerns over class sizes, and we've said that there's studies that show that up to a certain number, it doesn't affect academic performance. Is that right, Matt? Okay, can I see some of those? And also, I guess the one thing I think about, like, your presentation, it still haunts me that only 30% of our now 4th graders, which will be our then 5th graders in these high numbers, met state levels of acceptability for reading, right? it was 30%, like it was last year's third graders, which are this year's fourth graders, which will be next year.
I don't think that seems low.
Testing, I know, it was the third
Numbers.
grade.
Third and fourth.
There's some kind of testing numbers.
Yeah, it was
30%, I think, or on ELA, right? So I guess I think I'm with you up to a certain number, I just wanted to raise it because I'm worried with these numbers going even maybe a little bit higher, like what is that breaking point? And if these kids are at 30% already, what is this gonna do to that percentage as they go to middle school?
So the summary slide for that was that currently, this year, we have 7 classes with a student-teacher ratio of 25:1. So that's obviously without co-taught. So those are number of kids in a room with an adult. Next year with this model, the projections have us at 3 classes. So literally less than half with a student-teacher ratio of 25:1 or more. Of those 3, one of them is the second grade class, that there's gonna be kids in there who are not gonna be in that room full-time. In fact, only in for part of the day. So it was 2 or 3 if I remember correctly. So that's gonna get that number down really to 23 or so to 1 most of the time. And then the other ones are in 5th grade, which is obviously our oldest elementary. So the 2 25:1 or mores are in the upper elementary, grade 5. Moving on to the middle school, they are gonna see a reduction of 1.0 FTE. It is needs-based on special education numbers, it's a retirement. They're also gonna lose 2 TAs to the elementary level, but the good news is they get to keep teaming. At the high school, shameless plug right there to get support. Reduction of 2 FTE, right? One of them is through a retirement, one of them is through a resignation. Only one of those FTE is gonna impact the schedule, however. So it's 2 that we're losing in terms of FTE, 1 in terms of scheduling, and that's in social studies. So there is a reduction of numbers at the high school. So high school goes down 1, really 2 with the resignation. Middle school goes down 1, elementary goes up. At the high school, replacing physical education, English, and as we talked about, technology with business. This slide right here is really just taking the information from Heath's slide and putting it into one, because we wanted these presentations to be able to stand on their own, but you know this information now. 18 out of 18 districts have a program, the ones that responded, the ones with less than 2,000 students. Remember, we're at 2,500 students, 2,600. 8 districts that are less than 2,000 all have a business teacher or a program. Those are all smaller than us, already have a program. The ones that are bigger, 8 of them have more than 1. No program since 10-11, and that marriage of the need, which we clearly believe, and the opportunity, because we have the retirement in the technology department, and then what those components will look like, the 4+ courses and the CE, co-career exploration and internship program, as well as the CDOS piece. Since last budget, the district office is a 1.0 attrition that was in the IT department. That was one that was post-budget last year, never filled, not going to be filled, so it's a 1.0 reduction at the district level. In terms of additions, we have a couple things, small athletic ones. The girls wrestling program last year, which we started, kind of piloted, wanted to make sure it worked, all that good stuff. It was definitely a success. They do not have an assistant coach, just sort of put it on par with the boys program. We feel it is only right to give them an assistant coach there. And then unified bowling, which we were able to creatively start through a grant. That funding is not going to be available, so we move it into the general fund. But the total cost of unified bowling for everything is $3,000. So a very minimal expense for a great opportunity for our students. And then the nursing increase, about $57,000. That's going to allow us to provide increased time at Parker, which is required. It is something that we have to do. And then just because getting into the minutiae of the numbers, because Rebecca Everett is there now part of the time for 7.5 hours, and it's going to be a 0.6, which is an increase, but then she's not going to be going there because we've talked to Parker. Parker's been a great partner with us. We have a very good relationship with them. The goal there would be hire one person, so they're there all 5 days. So that would free Rebecca up to come back to the district. So technically, it's a little bit of an increase here in the district of literally like 7.5 hours a week or something like that. But as Kate's data showed, we are certainly on the low side of staffing in the nursing department. Summary and next steps. So how are we balancing the budget? The 1.6 million is going to be reduced through attrition, through breakage, those aid reductions, some other adjustments, both with revenue and costs, and then we get to that final deficit of $0. So we're going to walk through those quickly. On the attrition side, $350,000, 2 teachers, 2 aides. So those are people who are leaving, who are not being replaced, which will give us about a $350,000 savings. I said before, a lot of things broke our way. One of those things was the breakage number. We have over $500,000 in breakage. 10 teachers retiring is a lot. That is a very high number. We looked at that historically. Kim put together that data. That's high, right? We are replacing 10 retiring teachers with 10 teachers on that breakage slide. Remember, there's one that we're not through social studies, but the breakage is 10 retiring and replacing 10 of them. This is the aid reduction. In the end, that 9 becomes 6 because one's retiring, another's retiring, one's going from aid to TA. So in the end, it's going to be 6 aides that we are going to be losing. There's some more information coming up on that later. Also reducing some other things. Our legal fees, thankfully, are down. Our special ed placements. We reduced our BOCES expense. There was a leave replacement in the budget that we were able to get rid of. So we were able to reduce the budget another $380,000 there. And then the revenue increase, which we've touched upon, largely it's the interest income as Carrie's moved that number up, not all the way to what we're now making, but closer to that to kind of account for hopefully will be another good year of interest. The building use fees, which is really the custodial piece that we talked about, some increased tuitions, the excess cost aid. You have high expense kids going out, the following year you get aid for them. So we're seeing some high needs kids coming, the reimbursement from that coming back to us. The reductions on the aids, and this goes to Lauren's point before, we have 9, 3 of them are layoffs of permanent people. 3 are layoffs that are actually temporary, which we kind of broke off because since this process was done, literally the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've had 3 aides resign, right? And that's why you always see those ads. It's a position that kind of comes and goes a lot. So 3 people are going to be hired, but they're going to be hired as temporary. So they're not going to know when they take the job that it's a temporary position. So it'll still be a layoff, but only 3 of them are going to be people who are currently here. And of those 3, they've been here a relatively short amount of time. They're relatively new, and we're aware that one or at least one of them is planning on leaving anyway. So all positions are important, and we don't want to lose any of them. But just kind of want to give you a little context there about what was happening. One's going to be reassigned. That's the agency we talked about, and the 2 retirements. 2 teacher reductions, 0 layoffs. For 1 district office, 1 0 layoffs. We do strive to be a good employer, and we try to do that that attrition where possible. So reducing without laying people off is always a goal or a thought. The additions we just talked about: 0.6 nurse, wrestling coach, and unified bowling. Overall, there's your 24-25 to 25-26 budget, going from 66.6 to 69.5. The budget to budget increase is almost $3 million. That's 4.34%. So we've had 2 years in a row now where our percentage has been relatively high, right? Last year, it was high largely because of the stimulus money that we brought into the general fund. This year, also high for us, but we're trying to keep stuff that we want to keep, need to keep, and then also add some things that we feel can be added. And there's your next steps. Your next meeting is a discussion, no presentations, adoption at the following one, the hearing on the 6th, and then the vote on the 20th. Any non-co-taught questions?
I have a question, but I fear that I don't have the economic background to even understand the answer, maybe. But given what you said about, how we are impacted by like market rates and, that potential instability, how, if at all, do we build in any protections to account for that potential variability?
Carrie?
Really dodging them a lot to carry.
Honestly, that is somewhat hard to do, right? Because we only have certain revenue sources. Our main sources are tax levy and our state aid. So it's hard to, other than that, interest is volatile. But again, if you look at the percentage of our budget, it's relatively small. Our big things come from the tax levy and the state aid. And the state aid has been volatile. Like the last couple of years, we got nothing last year. We're getting over $1 million this year. So it does go up and down. So who's to say next year we're not back on hold harmless? I mean, I don't know if they move more things in the formula. You don't know what could happen. So it is sometimes somewhat unpredictable in terms of your revenue side. Your expenses are a little bit more predictable because you can roll your staff forward to forward. Things that are a little bit more unpredictable are things like your health insurance rates. A couple of years ago, our prescription rates were 20% increase. This year they're 3%. So that's a big difference there. And even with the ERS and TRS is a 5-year look back average in terms of like the stock market. So, if a bad year falls off and one comes on, that's not so bad. But if you start to get to 4 or 5 years of bad, that's kind of when your rates start ticking up a lot. So there is some instability, but we also have our reserves, and our reserves are there for a purpose as well. So that's to try to protect us, particularly TRS, ERS, against those big swings. So that's why we have those reserves set aside, and that's why we use some of them towards the budget. And if we ever had a year where we needed to dip into them for a particularly large increase, that's what they're there for. So that's really kind of how we use the reserves to protect a little bit of the budget, but all the volatility is kind of a little bit hard to predict.
Thank you.
How about just a quick question? So the budget to budget increase is 4.34%. The tax levy cap is, I want to make sure I got this right, 2.41%. Okay, thanks.
Will you please send this to me tonight? I have a lot of plane travel tomorrow morning early, so please allow. Thanks.
I have no plane travel, but can I have it too?
Just send it to all of us.
It'll be 11 o'clock at night.
I will get it out to the board tonight, and Linda will get it posted in board docs tomorrow, and it'll be on the budget corner as well.
Purportedly, presumably. So we have our discussion on the 24th. We have our adoption on the 7th. What are the chances we think that the state budget will come in before we adopt? Not that it would, well, I guess we could. I mean, who wants to lay the odds?
Technically due April 1st, but there's been years where it's been late. So it's been very quiet in terms of like for my organizations talking about things that are happening downtown. So I don't know.
And then, Michelle, I'm right there with you in terms of, any lobbying or, I know we're in a bunch of consortiums, but boy, getting those health insurance costs, it just seems like highly robbery.
It's not even just health insurance costs across the board are gonna be seeing some challenging things in the marketplace. And we absolutely could advocate. Unfortunately, the only thing that's going to drive health insurance carriers to reduce premiums is going to be related to legislation in favor of consumer protections, us being the consumers. And
On a federal level or state?
both. And that's a real challenging thing. I've been in that industry now over 20 years, and it's a hard thing to balance. But I mean, I've gone to the Capitol with you before, Michelle, I'll go again.
Yeah, I just don't want it to just go by Jim Carrey and to a lesser extent that.
It's a really challenging thing every year. It's an escape room wrapped within a riddle, wrapped within an enigma. And you guys pulled off, it is a good news budget, honestly. It's not perfect. It's not what we want because truly we've been getting screwed for years by the state. I've done some more recent analysis and probably next meeting I'll present a bunch of slides to show you how angry you should be with the state for taking your tax dollars and just keeping them. So given the hand that we're dealt and we couldn't return, you guys did an amazing job, so thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to talk more about co-teaching?
Yes.
All right. Do you want me to bring Sarah back up?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, lucky Sarah. All right, I tried to make a couple notes here.
Would you want that?
Can we go back to one of the slides that shows the student-teacher ratio?
Actually, I also have one question that I barely recognize my handwriting, before we go back over to the special ed stuff. How many library aides do we have total? And is this a complete reduction of all the library aides, or is there some percentage of library aides being kept?
Three library aides and
Okay.
reduction.
So that, okay, thanks.
Okay, I was trying to take some notes when the questions were coming in. Some of what I'm gonna say is gonna reiterate what Dr. Brancini said, but I want you to hear from the special education side of the house too, not to confuse the sides of the house that were up there, sorry. Okay, so in our consultant teacher model that we currently have in place, the consultant teacher comes into the general education classroom for math and ELA. They help implement accommodations and modifications, any sort of differentiation just for the special education students, and then they leave. No common planning time. Sometimes the principals have been able to get little pieces for general education and special education teachers here and there, but it's not a hallmark of the program. It's just kind of a lucky thing that some of them get, or some of them stay after school together or come in early so they can touch base. But it's not by design part of the model. The co-teach model, somebody said this, might have been you, Matt, I'll give you credit, is a complete mindset shift. It is not just a little more co-teaching. It is a mindset shift to yours, mine, and ours for the students sitting in the classroom. That's why those ratios can be what they are, because in a co-taught classroom, it's two educators planning, providing, responding to all of the needs of all of the students throughout the balance of the day, not just for ELA and math, right? So it's the special education teacher is there all day long. So big difference there, which in hindsight, I wish I would have highlighted more in my early slides. We are definitely, I alluded to this at the end, we're working through all of this every day for about the last couple weeks, and we'll continue to through the course of the rest of the school year. With building principal support, with teacher support, we're going to have to design class lists that are balanced, but do, obviously, all of the students, so we talked about this too, I wanted to clarify this a little bit more. Any student who right now has consultant teacher on their IEP would next year be served or supported in a co-teach model. Students who, I think somebody was talking to this, we have some students who maybe receive only related services, OT, PT, speech. They don't have to be in a co-teach model because they don't need the support of a special education teacher. Students with a 504 accommodation plan, that is a general education plan. Those students do not have to be scheduled into a co-taught classroom. They could be if building teams decide that is the right classroom for the student, but they don't have to be. So I wanted to make another note on that. And I wanted to circle back to the middle school and high school piece too. And maybe I undersold it a little bit because I don't want to oversell it. There is definite interest in moving a co-taught model into the middle school, but we've got to get it figured out, not figured out, we know it. We've got to get it implemented really well before we can stand in front of all of you and responsibly say, we're ready to do this at the middle school also. So step one is grades 2 through 5. I'm confident enough to believe that it's going to go well. Even where there's going to be hiccups and barriers, we're going to navigate those through that collaborative approach. We may be here at this point next year saying, we're ready to roll this up to the middle school. I just don't want to overpromise for any of us within this district when we haven't allocated the time to learn and figure out what it will look like in implementation. High school, possible. I have to say, it is a harder thing to do co-taught at the high school because you're getting into subject-specific certifications. Some special education teachers have a dual cert, which make them really good at co-teaching potentially with a general education teacher, but it is different at the high school, it just is. I don't know that that's something that we would come before you and say, we're ready to do this at the high school. That there's a lot of pieces that would need to be really in place before that happens. Again, you're looking at certifications, you're looking at higher level content. It's multiple steps away from where we are today. Tried to get to some of the questions that came in, but I can see there's more.
Michelle and then Jess.
So, and I don't know if there's data, I'm not trying to buck the system by any means. You guys are the professionals. I'm just very curious at, teachers' fatigue right now. And so let's just take this, 28, 14 to 1. The next teacher has 26 by herself or himself. To me, seems like that teacher could feel a little exhausted, feel like her class or his class is being left out. I don't know, would it make sense for the other class to have more, or would that create behaviorals? I'm guessing you guys are looking at all things, correct, when posing these classes to make sure that we aren't just, they look equal up there, but then, does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And that's why this is in the very early stages. That has to be looked at, right, at an individual basis, a kid by kid basis, with all the folks involved to try and get to the right number. And there's a little bit of art there, and I think there's a little bit of science there. But, 26 to 1 is larger than we want it to be in a perfect world. But keep in mind this slide here. We have 7 classes right now that are 25 to 1 or more right now, K-5.
Right.
We're getting that down more than half. One of them, of those 3, isn't really, we didn't want to not put it on here because then it would have been a little bit like we were not being transparent. But for all intent and purposes, it's really not 25 to 1 most of the day, which means we're really down to 2 classes that are 25 to 1 or more next year, as opposed to 7 right now. Totally understand the concern. This whole thing was built on trying to reduce that and improve that.
Right, I think that's to be.
Not perfect, and that's why we have some of the numbers here higher than we would. It's a limitation of our fiscal constraints.
So we're reducing that ratio, but I think, like my colleagues are concerned about, how are we supporting, we can't reduce that for all students and that impact that has on the teachers. So how are we supporting those teachers who can't make those ratio reductions yet? And I think another one of the questions I heard earlier too was understanding how many other districts work off of the same model of co-teaching, if you have that information.
Yeah, I can get that information. Anecdotally, I can tell you that I don't know of any district that is not, at least at some portion of their grade level, doing co-taught, but I can get specific information, certainly.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I don't know if you will finish with your question.
We've been behind the curve on this for years, right? We've been trying to get there. We have not been able to due to financial constraints. But in terms of the model, it's not a brand new model. It's not something that's not out there. It's actually being used literally.
I was doing it 20 years ago.
Right. If not all, then certainly most districts are using this model.
So
when we say most districts are using this model, are most districts using this model universally across all classrooms? So all of their classrooms are co-taught? Or are they having one cohort co-taught and then the remainder of the students in a sort of standard gen ed process? I mean, from a fiscal standpoint, yes, all of the other districts around here are doing this, but they also have all been receiving quite a bit more funding than we have for the last 10 years consecutively. So I guess I'm just curious how we balance for the teachers that are not in the co-taught model. How do we decide which teachers do the co-taught model? Are the teachers that are not in the co-taught model losing supports that they currently have? That's a lot
I
of
feel like
questions,
that's,
sorry.
well, I think that, from what I'm hearing from you guys, and Justine, you're up next, I apologize. What I'm hearing is that that's really the concern here. My assumption is that you guys are taking that into account, but the fear is that the non-code teaching teachers not lose the supports that they have currently in favor of this the lower ratio. We don't want to get too micromanaging here, and I think that's the concern. That's
not my intent, I guess I just wanna
no,
understand.
no, I don't think that's the intent. I think it's really just, if you're in the classroom next door and you're like, I got 26 and they got only 14. And I have no aid anymore. And again, I think we don't want to get too much in the weeds here. I want to hear from Jess, Dee, and.
One comment too when I was taking my notes that I didn't just add too. So typically right now, the students who have consultant teacher on their IEP are all in one section. So I think I heard a question about putting them all in the co-taught. Students who are identified needing a special education teacher to support them are already in one section with what in essence is less support than the co-teach model. That's speaking to the classroom that has a combination of students in it. And in terms of other districts, typically what happens is one section gets identified as the co-taught section at each grade level, not multiple.
So like this.
Yes, yes.
My one question Lauren took, but I was more specifically wondering what the other school districts locally were doing in their success rate. And then number two, I just wanted to echo what Adam asked and what Michelle touched on, and I think Megan too, and kind of what you were just summarizing. And I understand this is fluid, but I can't help but wonder if what everything you're saying is true instead of 28 and 26. Maybe it should be more like 30 and 24, 30 and 23. Like it seems like a lot to ask of a teacher who's not in the co-taught room on all of these.
Well, again, I get correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that's what you guys are shooting for as these numbers shake out, right?
Or are you saying those class sizes, so what you just said a second ago was touching on, like the class size, those classes are already established, is that what you're saying? Is that a piece of information we didn't have? That class is already set up because it was, the consultant already class, and so now we're just removing that? Were those the current class sizes?
No.
No.
Those are projections for next year.
That was a projection based on current data that was only meant to be an estimate and is subject to a lot more work and a lot more variables.
I mean, I think you guys did a fantastic job.
Certainly understand the concern.
Yeah, that's all. We're just, again, not micromanaging, but trying to make sure all things are looked at, right? We don't want this teacher to be fully supported and then this teacher having a breakdown because she's got 26 children. Like that's a real
Understood.
feeling, so. Thank you, guys.
Just to shift really quickly, and I'm sure that master's degrees that get you guys in the classroom, there's I just was, in regards to the professional development that gets each co-teacher to roughly the same level. So if you are, when you graduate with, Miss Height, or Miss Dick, you went to school for ever, and you learned, a set of tools and techniques and all. So if you get a special education certification, or you get, early childhood literacy, you get these sort of add-ons. So the buildup from special ed sort of back into general ed or from general ed across special ed is not like you're taking semesters more of courses. It's like a certain number of hours of PD that gets them to an equivalency in the room, right? So it's, again, we're not sending somebody back for more master's degree at ours. Okay. Thank you, Kate, for the nod. Go ahead, Laura.
So this is, again, anecdotal in terms of talking about this discussion, but just to speak to some of my colleagues' concerns about, well, then what does this look like in the middle school and the high school level? One of my kids has recently started with having consultant teacher services, and the intention there, and it was a very like purposeful discussion with the teacher, the special education department, looking at what are his needs, what's good enough for now, but what foundation do we want to reinforce so that he wouldn't need those support services in middle and high school. And of course, that's not going to be true for all students who have these needs, but just wanting to reinforce that concept too, that wherever we can preventatively offer those, bolster those supports for students at the primary stages of that learning means they have a higher likelihood of not needing that service when they move up to middle and high school. So while I understand the concern about continuity and needing to look at that, that's also a factor in thinking about what we can bolster early and be preventative changes how many students might even need that down the line.
Okay, I'm just gonna bring it back around to the budget. It's all connected. It's like your recycle thing. If everyone's good on their budget questions now, I think we can wrap up. I'll just remind everyone. So Jim, we look forward to getting our slides so we can.
You'll have them tonight.
We can digest them at midnight. And then if we do have, we'll have the discussion on the 24th. There'll be no presentation, just discussion, so we can sort of look at those slides, write out our questions if anybody does send anything by email for more information, since to all of us, and we might all have the same question. And if we're good, I'm going to thank you, Jim, and we will we'll move on. Thanks, Jen, that was a lot, and you guys are Mary and Matt, and thanks guys. It is three-dimensional chess. I'm not gonna hit that yet. Okay, we have our first session of public comment as for items on topics covered in today's agenda. And in fact, subjectively speaking, but I believe that all my blue sheets are on topics on tonight's agenda. So we'll probably give them everybody right now. So I'm going to start with, well, I'm just going to remind everybody, if you haven't already submitted a blue sheet, that's how you make a public comment. Linda or clerk. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Jeff, I know you talked to us ahead of time. We ask everyone to keep their comments succinct and to the point. And I recognize those are citizens for the library. Generally, we don't answer questions in public session, but we will reach out afterwards with appropriate information. Okay. We'll start with Jeff Brown, who's going to speak about the French program. Mike.
I'm Jeff Brown. I'm a French teacher at the high school. No co-teaching questions, I promise. Dr. Francini, members of the Board of Education, administrators, teachers, students, ladies and gentlemen. I don't envy Dr. Francini and Mr. Haladin, who had to evaluate the future viability of our French program and who came up with the decision to phase out French at Averill Park. Nor do I envy the members of the board who will vote to end the longstanding program that has enjoyed so many great successes at Averill Park. Our administration put careful thought into this proposal and reminded teachers more than once that this decision has nothing to do with their admiration of our program, of what we have done all these years, and what our students have accomplished. In fact, at the ACTIFL National Conference in Philadelphia, we learned that French programs across the country are experiencing the same existential threat of not having any candidates to replace current teaching staff preparing for retirement. Even the French embassy doesn't have a solution. Dr. Francini's decision was made with great consideration and thoughtful timing to accommodate retirement eligibility. The situation is as ironic as it is awful. Therefore, I think it is fitting and right that we take a moment to acknowledge and recognize the lifespan of the French program at Averill Park. The French program's golden age began about 25 years ago at a time that just so happens to coincide with the hiring of Amy Miller and yours truly, Jeff Brown. As a matter of fact, the program was threatened before when a previous administration suggested dropping French altogether, only to reconsider. Then later, around 2007, a different administration eliminated French 5 from the course offerings, yet brought it back the following year. Most recently, however, the elimination of the 6th grade exploratory program could be considered an early death knell. Throughout, program enrollment has always been about 1/3 of the Spanish enrollment. That is no surprise and reflects the national trend, even through post-secondary education. The French program's enrollment has always been robust, with almost all 8th graders continuing as 9th graders, a large proportion of French 3 sophomores continuing to level 4 as juniors, and about half of those ultimately finishing in senior level 5. The secret sauce of the program's strong numbers can be attributed mainly to Mrs. Miller's legendary day trip to Montreal for 7th graders and the weekend trip to Quebec City for 8th graders. According to her estimate, more than 500 Algonquin middle school students took advantage of those trips. The program welcomed those enthusiastic learners to the high school, where learning intensified, diversified, and culminated with college credit for juniors and seniors. In 2018, the program accepted the New York State Education Department's challenge and began our Seal of Biliteracy opportunity. That year, 2 French students achieved their seal, and afterwards, a dozen more achieved theirs, even during COVID. Beyond teaching the basics of the French language, the program made opportunities for students to experience the culture in more in-depth ways. In addition to Mrs. Miller's trips to Canada and Europe, more than 100 high school students traveled to France on organized tours visiting Paris, Brittany, Normandy, and the Loire Valley. Dozens have attended immersion programs at the Rensselaerville Institute and the University of Albany. Several hundred students have had French pen pals, and well before virtual instruction, APHS French students Skyped with students from Bordeaux. Through the distance learning system, APHS French 4 and 5 classes were sent to Cairo-Durham and Ichabod Crane. Since 2011, the program has also provided opportunities for 22 French teenagers to come and stay with Averill Park families during summers, with one family hosting 2 brothers more than once. 14 AP host students returned to France with those teenagers to make those visits true exchanges. After this coming summer, the program will add 1 more French teenager and 1 more APHS student to the overall total. The program's graduates have studied in Switzerland, France, and Senegal. They have worked with Peace Corps volunteers in Burkina Faso and Morocco. They have written books about the French Foreign Legion, taught English in France, and studied film production in Benin. One is now teaching beginning French and ESL in the Guilderland School District. The irony is that it seems nothing can be done to continue this vibrant, creative, and flourishing program once Mrs. Miller and I retire. Nobody is happy about this situation, least of which are the students who for more than 20 years embraced our program as their window to the outside world. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. Michael Carrier, and
Hi, everyone. First and foremost, thank you everybody for what you guys do for our district. Just wanted to stand up here today. It's actually my first meeting. Stand up here today and just let everybody know that obviously with the discussions of class sizes, there is a large group of kindergarten parents currently who unfortunately can't make it to these meetings based on when the time of the night is, not able to get babysitters and whatnot, but we've been communicating and obviously fully support what Jared and Lindsay have provided to you guys already, data, to back that up. Obviously, the class discussion, there's a lot of questions from even the board, which poses even more questions for us as our kids are going to advance through the school district. And really, I'm just here to respectfully hope and ask that soon we get an answer on the kindergarten and first grade classes. Obviously, the issues we've been addressing now are for the kindergarten classes. Well, our kids are going into the first grade classes, which is not being addressed by these co-parent or co-teaching, not parenting. So again, thank you everybody for what you're doing, but we respectfully hope that we hear some answers / kind of resolutions on what those first 2 grades will receive in terms of help in those class sizes, which are just as large as the ones we saw on the board. Thank you.
All right, Jessica Duffy.
Hi, I'm Jessica Duffy from Post and Kill Elementary School. I'm the library media specialist there. I just wanted to say, I know the district is in a difficult place with the budget. However, I need to advocate for our elementary libraries. This is a place where all students receive instruction in the New York State's computer science and digital fluency standards. No matter their experience with technology with their classroom teacher, when they come to library media, all students will receive instruction in computer literacy. This means they learn how to be safe and protect their information online, but it also means a foundational understanding of how computers work, computational thinking, navigating information in media, and presenting their thinking with the technological tools available. On library days, it means students, no matter their classroom teacher, will gain an exposure to different types of literature, how to locate the literature, and the opportunity to select and engage with reading material of their choice. Making cuts to the library program will hurt our youngest learners who needed the greatest support. This is the foundation of their educational career. I'm proud of our library program as it is in this 24-25 school year, and I'm concerned these cuts will result in overworked librarians who can no longer provide meaningful lessons for the computer science and digital fluency standards, and who will struggle to meet the needs of students during book exchange, especially with the large class sizes. My aide this past month, she shelved at least 1,000 books, repaired on average 3 to 5 books a week, withdrew 3 to 5 books a week. She pulled 270 animal and pet books for our One School, One Book Buddy Reading Day, which are distributed to classrooms and then will be collected and put back on the shelves. She assisted with coding support for kindergarten, first and second grade classes. 26 first graders require a lot of support on the computers. She straightens shelves and replaces misplaced books. She tallies interlibrary loan data for the school library system. She assists with children who need more support during instructional time. She provides book exchange to several students throughout the week who visit the library incidentally while I'm teaching. And she distributes overdue notices and tracks overdue books with students. And she processed 20 new books to the library. This is all done by the aide, which when cut will have to be done by me, and as a result compromises the entire program. So, thank you.
Forgive me, Jean Seal.
Hi, I'm Jean Seal. I'm the library media specialist at Miller Hill Sand Lake Elementary. And gee, guess what I'm talking about? And it isn't co-teaching, although I do have a couple of comments. Last Friday, about 3 o'clock, I learned the position of library aide was being eliminated for next school year. As you heard, Jess was a spot on what happens day to day. And I'm not sure that people who haven't ever run in a library or worked in a library understand the details and the clerical parts that are there. Just to refresh the school board's memory of what special area teachers do in all 3 elementary schools. We see K-5 every day, 1 of each section. So it's approximately 1/3 of the school. In 3 days, we see the entire building. Art is shared or half-time. For phys ed and library media lit, we see them every 3 days. We see the entire school in 40-minute periods. I love the mention of student-teacher ratio. When we see a class, we see the homeroom. So if there are 26 kids assigned, we see 26 kids. If there are 30 students assigned, we will see 30 students, at least at the first round out, or how I'm thinking about it. That's a lot of students in a 40-minute period. There's no wiggle room in that in our daily schedules. So just as hindsight, today at Miller Hill, the library circulated 125 books. We had some student walk-ins. We had our usual schedule. Last week, in 5 days, 622 books. 2 were interlibrary loan, 10 were to teachers, the rest were all to students. Physically checking in those books, checking for repairs and damage, mold, water bottle issues, and getting them back out on the shelves will all fall on the library next year. So that's clerical, it's physical, but the biggest impact is going to be on our students. So just think for a moment when you're in Home Depot and you have to get that little piece of something to fix the plumbing, right? You look in the aisle, you think it says plumbing, you can't find what's there. There's nobody around to help. You walk up down the aisle, you even yell sometimes. There's nobody there. So you walk over by the cashiers and they go, oh, just wait a minute, we'll have somebody with you. And you wait 10 minutes and nobody shows up. Most of us leave frustrated. I'm really afraid that that will be the situation with our students in the elementary school, especially the kindergarten and first graders who haven't yet had the skills on location and finding, that they will come in, and while one of us is standing at the circulation desk, and trust me, this weekend my mind ran through, can I walk around with a Chromebook and do it while I'm walking? Can I do it while they line up and go? And people will get lost. People will, it won't be efficient. It won't be systematic. It won't be well organized. And our students will leave maybe just grabbing something, but not finding the book about dinosaurs they wanted, or the book. Having somebody at that circulation desk helps secure it. It's also, Sarah mentioned the contact with people. It's another person who's saying, oh, you picked a book about a cat. Do you have a cat? It's another contact. Okay, so as Jess pointed out, our aides manage. They take care of all those things. The elimination, I'm winding up because she's going to start playing the music and the mic's going to drop. The elimination of the library aides. All the clerical responsibilities will fall to librarians. By eliminating the role of elementary library aides, you're impacting students and compromising the learning environment in our elementary programs and buildings. And to quote Dr. Franchini, how much program do you want to have? Thank you for your time.
I know that I've started doing this, for any of the speakers that are speaking, if they wouldn't mind and they're comfortable doing so, turning in your comments if you've got them written, because 3 minutes is not a lot of time, and I don't want the abridged version, I want to hear everything.
Yeah, if you want to turn in or email your comments, if it's on a computer, you can send those to us. We appreciate that. Nancy Bush.
Third time's a charm. I'm Nancy Bush. I'm the library media literacy teacher at Wesleyan Lake. Just to answer the question before of what was being cut in libraries, there's 5 schools and just the elementary ones are being cut. So I just wanted to make that clear because I don't know if that was clear before. Our library curriculum renewal team presented to the board in June about our curriculum, largely about how we are working to integrate the New York State computer science and digital fluency standards that have come out. You were very complimentary of what we showed you, appreciative of our work on behalf of the students. And in December, the elementary school principals presented about the district school number 3, which happens to be digital fluency. My principal, Carrie Rocher, showed you examples of media literacy projects from different grade levels. Those were from all 3 schools. Those projects happened because we had aid support. They helped us by helping the children when we were working on them. They helped us by taking a child down to the restroom or helping them with something or giving me time to work with them on something specific while they helped several other children. Especially the primary grades. I cannot stress that enough. I don't think any of us would say that that is not the most important thing. As Jean said, we see every student, not every day, but every 3 days, as does physical education, but we teach 2 curriculums, library and media literacy. Depending on the building, we teach 5 to 7 classes a day, every grade level, every day, also including some multi-grade skills classes. There's consistency with a library aide. When we have a substitute, the aide is there to help the sub navigate those different classes and levels. And not a lot of aides really love being in the library. Or not aides, substitutes. It's a lot of work. Or in media literacy. Having this person there reassures the children there's someone they're comfortable with when a regular library media literacy teacher is not there. Teachers also know they can get the help with what they need. They can send a child down who's having a problem with a Chromebook or an app, or a Chromebook's not working. They can get help from the aide to help them with a DVD player that doesn't seem to be working today, or getting books or materials that they need right away. We can count on our aides to help us, to be there for the kids, to be there for us when we have to run to the bathroom because we didn't have any time between the 2 classes. Whatever it was, they've been there, and we've got great teams. The library in a school or a town is a big part of the community. Don't let our school community suffer by definitely cutting out these positions. These aides are definitely worthwhile. We know there has to be some changes, but if we could have them part of each day, that would be helpful. It wouldn't be great, but we would take it. There's got to be some other ways that we can support these curriculums, especially for the younger students. I thought back today about my kids' years in Ingram Park, K through 12, maybe your own, maybe your children now. There was always a librarian and a library aide. There's always 2 people there because there was a lot to do. And that, for my kids, was before there was media literacy. And now we've added that, and now we're taking away a person that's really a big integral part of having that happen at a time when we need it. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. We really do appreciate everybody coming here and sharing their expertise and their experience. I have no more blue sheets right now, so we will, again, with our gratitude for everybody being here, we will move on to our agenda. I think we're into item number 5. Again, thank you guys for all your input. Item number 5, approval of our minutes from the last meeting. May you like first make a motion? Yes, and Adam seconds the motion to approve the minutes of February 24th, 2025. Any discussion on those minutes from last Tuesday? Okay. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of adopting those minutes as written? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda for business personnel and special education on 6, 7, and 8. Adam is first. I need a motion, 11 seconds. Discussion on consent agenda. Jess and then Lauren.
I wanted to first say thank you to the High Tech Lawn and Snow Service for their donation to the automotive program. And I also wanted to say thank you to Spotty Dog Books for their donation of 200 books to the high school library. And lastly, I wanted to acknowledge the 34.5 years that Sheila Pauly put in with the district as she is scheduled to retire. We wish her well in her retirement and thank her for her service to the district. Thanks, Jess.
I have 2 brief questions. One, Could you clarify the memorandum of understanding for Colony School District? I wasn't quite clear what that was speaking to. That is number 6.
So, I can speak to that. Like, we spoke earlier about the Nurse for Parker School. So we have students that attend private schools in other school districts. So we pay other school districts for services that they get at those private schools. So that is just us paying South Colony for the services that they provide at the private school within their district for our students that go there.
But that's not Parker.
Not Parker, no.
Okay, but another private, okay.
Yeah, and you'll see quite a few of those come across.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question, that's you, was just wanting some clarification too about the music therapy bullet point, because looking at the dates that seem to be at the end of school, beginning of summer. So I was a little confused about what, I felt like I was maybe not understanding.
We're not there yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were on 7.
That's, no, we're.
Okay.
That's
Then
fine.
reserve that for later.
Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of the consent agenda? That's unanimous, Linda. Thank you, guys. Okay, we have some action items to do. I need a motion to approve the proposal for the Washington DC trip. That's April 4th through 6th, coming up. Megan first, Megan second. Jesse, you do it now. Okay, Jesse. Any discussion on Washington?
Supervision, just my usual call for making sure there's enough supervision and backup supervision and all of that, but really appreciate that we're giving the students the opportunity to visit our nation's capital. Super important, and I appreciate everybody involved.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the Washington DC trip? Is unanimous. And you have a motion to approve the agreement by between Averill Park Central School District and Expressive Journeys LLC Music Therapy per the attached, again, the attached are sent us. Megan first, Adam second, discussion, Lauren, back to you.
I guess that's the one I had the question on.
That is the one you have the question, yeah, and it is. If I'm correct, it's for the upcoming school year, not just the summer.
So it starts in July and goes through to the end of
June.
Okay.
26. Okay, I did this same double take too. So we're approving to put this in place for the 25-26 school year, which is coming up, and that's kind of crazy to think that it's almost 2026. I mean, it's not almost, but we're looking at it.
And
go ahead.
And is this a new service that we haven't previously offered before, or this is something that's been?
This is for special education students, and if it helps you, at the top of the contract, you can see it says ESY. That acronym stands for extended school year. That essentially means summer school for like special education students. So like when it says ESY 2025, that's the summer program, and then it's the school year. So these are music therapy students specific to IEPs.
And Carrie, just to clarify that even if we, we do these each year for the various contracts we have, we don't have a contract like this where we would do it for like 5 years. We would do it annually, so that's why it's not new, we just vote on these, we just review them every month. You review them every year, you fill us in and we vote on annually, so that's why it's. You good? Okay, awesome, that's good. All those in favor of approving this? Okay. That is unanimous, thank you guys. So, we need a motion to approve the agreement by and between the Averill Park Central School District and APTA regarding Caitlin Rose Marino, again, for the Adam first, Megan seconds, discussion. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving this agreement as written? Okay, that is unanimous, thank you guys. I need a motion to adopt the resolution resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the inclusion of French in the school curriculum will be phased out in this the resolution as written. Lauren first, thanks, Adam seconds, discussion. Jess, then Megan.
I'm just wondering what the numbers are over the next couple of years until it's ultimately phased out.
Like how many students are still there?
Do you want to skip ahead, Megan, on that, which one I can leave?
I just want to express, my sadness that this is the direction it's going in. I appreciate Mr. Brown's words. I can tell you, coming up through, I didn't grow up here. I grew up in a district that was quite a bit larger and had, now understanding as an adult, quite a bit more funding. And we had 3 languages to choose from. And oddly, I picked German. I just had to be different. But it was the benefit of having the opportunity to be exposed to something that I otherwise would not have ever had the opportunity to be exposed to. And I recognize that the loss of this is not just the loss of potentially learning another language, but to Mr. Brown's point, the exposure to other cultures and opportunities, which I think is very important to the broader education of our students in the community. So while I understand that we are doing this out of necessity and whatnot, I just want to make sure that the community understands that it's not taken lightly in any way. And that it is with sadness that we move in this direction, and that I move in with the board in this direction.
Okay, so, was that enough time? Not that I was trying to,
Sure.
not trying to kill time, but if you're comfortable, you
Yep.
can also.
So for projection for next year would be 55 students that would be in 8th grade taking French. In French 2, with essentially 9th grade students, would be 24, and French 3, 33 students. And then French 4 and 5, a little more difficult to determine because they don't all necessarily go on to 4 and 5. The sequence to achieve that pathway ends at 3, so we don't have a definite number for 4 and 5.
So the plan is this year, 8th grade, will have the opportunity to take French all the way through.
This year's 7th grade will.
And
So those 55 students that are taking French 7 will be able to take French 1 as 8th graders and
at least
continue
1,
on
2,
through.
and 3.
Yeah.
I too want to, I won't repeat Megan's comments, but just echo that it is not ever easy or fun to do these reductions, but Mr. Brown, we appreciate you. I appreciated throughout the years that I've been sitting here, your wall of fame. I love seeing where the students go with whatever they decide to do, and I love that you bring it back and show some really good case studies, if you will. So, thank you for that.
As the parent of a student who you may very well, hopefully, see next year, I just also appreciate that the sort of thoughtfulness of how we're embracing this unfortunate trend. I appreciate it as a parent, and it shouldn't stop anybody from going to learn another language. We should all try and go learn another language, especially French. We can order great food for French. All right, moving on. If you have no further discussion on French, I can, all those in favor, say we. That's, Linda, that's unanimous for the resolution.
I did my group.
Thank you. We have one more presentation now. Thanks for all those action items. Should be interesting.
All right, well, get started here. It's quick, it's a 2-slide presentation, so it won't take too long, it's late night. So we had conversations a couple of board meetings ago when I did the non-instructional presentation. We talked about every year we have a bus proposition and whether or not we should introduce an electric bus into that bus proposition. So currently going through a NYSERDA study. That study is not complete yet, but I asked the gentlemen who were doing the study if they could give me the cost of what it would be to introduce one electric bus into our fleet, what that means to our facility, and also includes terms of the cost of the bus. So what you're seeing tonight is not the full study, it's just one of 8 tasks that they had. So looking at the cost of the bus, the cost of the electric bus from the quote that we got from our dealership is $504,000. We would be eligible for a NYSERDA NYSPIP voucher, which is the New York School Bus Incentive Program. That voucher could reduce the cost of the bus to the district by $257,000, bringing the net cost of the bus down to $246,000. I put on the bottom of the slide the comparison as to the diesel buses that we're buying this year. They're $162,000. So the difference between the cost of a diesel and the electric bus is about $84,000 increase between the two. If we do move forward, I need to get on applying for the voucher fairly quickly to make sure that we have that in place before we put it out to the community. So that is one thing there. So timing of this is important as well. When we look at the charging stations that are needed within the bus garage, the charging hardware and installation, the cost of those 2 things would be fully covered by the NYSPIP voucher for the charging station because there's funds available for both the bus and the charging station. Additional costs that we may have, annual charging software, charger networking, and design fees to install the charger. You can see we don't have, those are to be determined, but the software and the networking, the costs are there, the estimated costs are there. Those expenses would be eligible for transportation aid, so we could get refunds back from the state on those costs. Utility service upgrade, we will need a utility service upgrade, if we go for the entire fleet, but just doing one bus doesn't require any work in terms of the facility upgrade. So it's just installing the charger and then purchasing the bus. So that's what we would be looking at if we did a 1-bus pilot in terms of an electric bus.
I have a question. Is the aid on an electric bus different than the aid on a diesel bus?
The aid is out for a longer amount of time.
But it's still the 70.9%? Okay, I'm both. Interesting.
So if you go back to your first slide, what's the net out of pocket for us for the bus?
The net cost of the bus would be the $246, but.
But it's aidable, right?
Yeah, so what we do is we do like we do with all of our buses, we bond for them, right? So every year, we won't have this one-time annual cost. We do a 5-year bond for them. So we have principal interest costs that we add into the budget each year. So it's not a one-shot deal like we do with any of our bus purchases. It's not all of that $900,000 we're buying into the budget in 1 year. We amortize that through the cost of the bond.
Okay, but 246 is what it costs us. There's not aid that we get on top of that.
We do get aid back, transportation aid, but you're looking at the net cost of the bus. I mean, I could roll out transportation aid you get 70% back on top of the bus, but it'd be the same for our diesel buses. So if you're looking at the net cost.
Sorry, our net cost is about 30% of that 246.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But can I ask a dumb question though? Does that mean that it's 30% of the 246 that finance what you're saying? The bond is financing, right?
Correct.
And so we'd be financing some amount of money that I thought I could do in my head.
80 grand.
Thank you.
I want to make a few comments. Thank you for all you do, first of all. Second of all, I want to point out that $84,000, that cost, while it does not seem like a big number, that's actually the cost of our 3 library assistants that we're talking about getting rid of. The other point is Columbia, we were just at the Capitol, has 5 buses, Chatham, I'm sorry, has 5 buses which have transported 0 students for all the issues. So I 100% am not on board with purchasing an electric bus. We don't have the funds to just go and test the waters right now.
Yeah, I'm also kind of struggling with this. So, as the community may be aware, Michelle and I and Sam participated in Lobby Day to advocate at the state capitol with our legislators. We had the benefit of joining other school districts that are in our Questar kind of family. And one of the districts that was there with us was Chatham District. Their superintendent shared quite a bit of challenges related to their being somewhat the guinea pig within this endeavor. They have purchased 5 electric buses. All 5 buses have had repeated challenges where they had to go back to the dealership for repairs that took months at a time. To Michelle's point, none of the buses have actually transported a student since their outlay of cost. They've also had challenges related to the original specifications for the charging stations and how they were installed. Based on those specs, they were installed, and now the insurance is coming back saying that the charging stations are too close together. However, what do? You gotta take them out and redo it. I'm struggling with this not because I don't believe that the broader issue of environment is important. I do. But I'm also in receipt of an assessment that as I understand it, based on the community murmurs, is that a lot of folks received an updated assessment on their housing, which I don't know, mine was a little more than double. So, and that's what I'm hearing. So before we integrate additional costs for curriculum and all of the other things, my taxes are going up quite a bit. A lot of people are facing that. There's a lot of economic uncertainty. I don't know if our community can sustain the cost of this. And I'm very, very concerned about the steps that we take to go forward. Because we need the governor to step back into reality on some of these things. And understand that prior to mandating that an entire state follow something, they really needed to do the due diligence, they really needed to do the feasibility studies at the urban, suburban, and rural levels to understand what those impacts are going to be and take into consideration all of the residents of the state, which I don't believe were done. And I'm really having a hard time with this.
I think one thing that you said, I just wanted for the record to say, it's my understanding that you said something about their outlay of costs. And just to clarify, I don't think that Chatham spent, it was all fully under
They had
because of
grant,
the
I
time.
believe they had grant funding.
Yeah, the time, yeah.
That said, if they had to replace their entire fleet, there would be outlay of cost and they have quite a few less students than we do.
Right.
And so our outlay of cost would be astronomical to meet this burden.
I'm not, I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't that they spent all this money and then it just went into the wind, just for that. And then the other question was, just sort of recognizing the different taxation entities, right? Like, I'm not in West Sand Lake, I know kind of what's going on there. Just West Sand Lake, I'm sorry.
The town of Sand Lake.
Thank you. But just for anybody who might be watching, that is, these are different funding, no, not even entities, right? So town tax is what we pay in Post and Co. That is an entity that is taxing us for the town, and what our tax, like what we are going to go out to the community is a different ask. I'm not quibbling with how much everybody is being taxed. I just want to clarify that we don't, like, what Sand Lake does and what Post and Co does isn't.
We are 103 square miles over 9 towns, and I understand that the town of Sand Lake is only one town that is impacted over those 9 towns. but those residents are
Understood.
voters and I don't believe that we can.
Yeah, I just want to keep this, our agenda onto like the school
No, I
board
understand.
agenda.
And the confusion is
just
whether or
as-
not we as a board control that stuff.
Yeah, it's totally
We
separate.
don't control the assessment value.
I never implied that we did.
No, I don't think
I'm
you
just
did.
trying
But that
to make it
confusion,
clear.
like,
It could be,
Just
yeah.
like you're trying to.
Just so that everybody. Jess, did you have something that you wanted to, I wasn't sure. if
I
you-
have a lot to say. So, it's unfortunate that Chatham's having a problem. How many districts have implemented electric buses with minimal problems? I'm not gonna say nothing's problem-free. I'm sure we have problems sometimes with our diesel buses. There's a lot of myths out there about the reliability of electric buses, and I think they have been proven that they can be successful in urban and rural districts. I am also concerned that this voucher, the $260,000 on the table, won't be there next year. We already missed a window, and I'm not complaining, and I don't want to go back, but last year there was federal funding available. There is no federal funding anymore for this stuff. So yes, we can kick the can down the road. I know the mandate is not changing at this point in time, but to be honest, I think we should go out with one because we cannot continue to keep kicking the can down the road, because I think ultimately, if we do that, it's going to be more catastrophic than starting to phase things in. I agree, this is awful that the amount is also the amount of some of the cuts that we are facing. But I don't think there's ever gonna be an ideal time. We might not get this generational opportunity on the buses. But I think they can be reliable. I think if we do put it out there, we can have somebody come and we can have a community forum with some experts, and I think that would be helpful in alleviating some of the concerns. I know last year we talked about it, saying, oh, they catch on fire. Well, the reality is electric buses, percentage-wise, catch on fire a lot less than internal combustion engines. So I understand there's concerns because it's a new, what's that?
Let's not-
So I know there's differences, but the fire companies are learning how to do that too. I'm sure that when, a century ago, when cars came out, people were worried about how do we put out a gas fire when we don't have to put out a fire on a horse. I mean, there's always technology advancements, right? I mean, there's always going to be issues that need to be solved when technologies change, and I think they change for the better in this case because of the emissions that are associated with diesel buses that cause physical harm to our students and climate change. And so I am for trying one bus.
Laura. So my apologies, because I'm, as a newer board member, I'm coming later to the conversation and still trying to catch up. So before us today is the proposal, like is what it would look like to purchase a singular bus and create the infrastructure to support a singular bus. But from everything I've gathered thus far on the conversation, like this is kind of a choice this year, but it's still like the due date or sort of needle marker has not moved. We're just getting closer to it. So it's a choice, but not really a choice in a way. I'm just trying to understand like what
I
the,
kind of describe it as we're playing a game of chicken with the governor.
okay,
We're gonna see who blinks first.
okay, that's helpful. So like, yeah, so part of the like weight on implementation has been with the mindset that perhaps that due date, some of the analysis of it might
It's
change.
unattainable right now. They don't have the grid, the infrastructure, they can't manufacture buses in time. There's a whole lot more to it that we can fill you in on later, but there's
So that, but that
many
has been
issues right now.
part of why we thus far have not moved forward and why there are still concerns.
the buses are too heavy for Gold Bridges. We went and did a presentation in Buffalo the year before you were here, so, there are many, many concerns.
Yeah, I'll catch up on that. I don't want to like rehash everything for those who have heard it and are up to date. I just wanted to clarify that question as I'm understanding the concerns too. But thank you. I will.
There's definitely still a lot of engineering and stuff that I would want to hear. My understanding though, definitely one of my biggest takeaways from that is in the game of chicken, I don't see the other side, which we shouldn't be on the other side, but here we are. That there's not, I think a couple of the representatives indicated that there was no interest in moving the goalpost, pushing it out. That it was expected to say that even if there were waivers, they would be short term. And my expectation is that in the next couple of years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, 2035 is when we have to be fully electrified, correct? Carrie, it's 2035 that the whole fleet is expected to be electrified, and then I know that there was a date that we
So
have to stop. Hold on, I just want to ask Carrie.
Yeah, so the markers are 2027, your purchases are supposed to be electric. By 2035, your fleet converted.
So, having gained this out a little bit, right, 2027 is very soon. I mean, that joke about it's almost 2026 is actually not that much of a joke in this scenario. So, again, even if there's a couple of years of a waiver, 2029 is not that far. And so if we are going to have to be in a scenario where we are having to buy electric buses in 2027, 28, or 29, I do agree with Jeff, like, it just behooves us to get at least one on the road and having us start working out the kinks. It is a system and a situation that is certainly far from perfect. I would like to see, more than a 70% reimbursement rate as a greater incentive for us to get these buses, as a recognition that we are weighing program, like Michelle said, we are weighing program against something that is arguably not mission, right? I mean, it is, like, we can't teach kids unless they're at school. Well, no, you can't teach kids unless they're at school. And, kids with asthma, whatever, you want to extrapolate it. But all these things we want. I would love for there to be federal funding for this as well. I would love for there to be more data. I'm sure that the technology, the way things go, what it looks like in 2 years and 4 years is leaps and bounds what it looks like today, just like with our smart watches, which I do not own, by the way. Right, it's watched anyway, I will not digress, but it's a sticky situation. None of us love the implementation of this. I agree with Jeff that I think that getting one bus, if for nothing else, then to have hard data to bring back to our representatives to say, here's what works and here's what doesn't, and here's the help that we need if you really want to make this work. Because right now we're talking to folks in speculative terms, right? It's here's what happened for those guys, here's what happened for those guys, and we don't actually know what it would be like here. Again, would I like for it to be 80% reimbursement, 90%, 100%? Yes, but I think that, like, the train's coming down the tracks. So, that's my 2 cents. If anybody else, I know I usually go last, but I just want to get those dates nailed down. Adam.
Tired, so I'll try and keep this a little tight. It's a huge population in the capital district that goes up to Saratoga in August and Betts. And if you just listen to the people, when you say, how'd you do? There's kind of 2 answers. Well, fine, or I won. So, because the I won story has more legs and it travels much further. So you would think, everybody that goes to Saratoga wins, because that's all I hear about. It's not really the case if you've ever been to Saratoga. I'm always the guy that comes back and says, it was nice. So I feel like I first believe that the governor's agenda, while it's coming from good motivation, I think the timing is too aggressive. I also don't see any way that we're gonna change her mind, although I hope that mind gets changed somehow. But the only way to find out whether our experience is good or bad is to go to Saratoga. In other words, take advantage of this $250,000 in aid and get our first bus and try it out, see if it works and see if there's problems. Otherwise, we don't know. I don't know the scoop of Chatham. I don't know if Chatham bought buses that fell off a truck somewhere or something. I don't know what their scoop is, but we gotta try it, and that's the only way to know. So I'm in favor of this. And I don't like being in this position, but given the hand that we're dealt, this is the best decision.
Sorry.
I did have a question.
Yes, and let's hear you, just to clarify, we're not voting on anything tonight.
She did say that it has to
You
be
need to get
somewhat
in
soon.
soon, so
When
that
is
was-
it roughly when you need to know by?
Yeah, so typically the second meeting in March, we put the bus bond or the bus ballot, the bus proposition for approval, so, it'd be good to do it next time, if not, it'd probably be the first meeting in April.
So the actual electric bus cost, is that a full-size bus?
This is a full-size bus, yes.
And the NYSERDA voucher, we only know, do we know how many years they're gonna do it, Jess? So it could just be this next year, it could be 3 years.
It's hard to say. We're looking at Clean Energy Fund 2.0 that starts in 2026, so.
Chester, maybe you want to say something?
No, I'm so split, I don't know. I'm just fully torn.
Well, and it's a lot to digest tonight. And I actually spent a chunk of time reading what you sent us, and I might need to I don't know, Jesse, have you explain it to me, the engineering behind it, just in terms of the longer term costs.
I think we can get somebody to come and have a community forum and talk to us, and talk to the whole community about it. But we also need to understand that their electric buses are cheaper to maintain. I mean, you don't have to change the oil. Over the life of the bus, the cost is not $85,000 more. If you do a life cycle analysis.
It would be helpful to have that data, because that was what my dealership said to me in terms of an electric vehicle as well. But yeah, that would be helpful data to say, and to have for what maintenance would be projected at.
Is that something?
We could try.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, technology leaps are always scary, and I give you that. But we also need to move in a direction that's better for our students' health and our environmental health. And
anytime something's forced, it's never good for everybody. And they're forcing your hand, so you should look at all things.
I understand that it's a tricky, the way this is being played out is far less than ideal. But if we don't try, this is a case where things aren't necessarily gonna change on their own without a push.
What would we do with the money if we didn't allocate it to the electric bus? Good question.
So the way each year we present a bus replacement plan to you, right? I think that this year was something like 960,000. So essentially what we would do, I can't remember exactly, we had 6 buses for 960,000. We do 5 diesel buses and 1 electric bus. Either way, we need to keep continuing to replace our our buses. So it's not necessarily what we wouldn't buy, because we'll bond for this. Again, so your costs are gonna be spread out over multiple years for any of the buses that we buy. We don't add this number directly to the budget, because it's built into our financing plan where we have bonds rolling on and off every 5 years. So it's not like we're taking any of the buses and saying, okay, we have to add this money into this year's budget. We'll finance for it over the summer, and then the principal and interest payment will be rolled into next year's budget. So that's kind of how it works.
The bus proposal is separate than the regular budget, correct?
It is,
That goes to vote?
yes.
And
So-
so,
Sorry, go ahead.
to speak to Michelle's, like, I agree that, regardless of where you fall on the line of the electric bus thing, the juxtaposition of having just talked about those aids and now looking at the numbers here, feels terrible, but if I'm understanding what you just said correctly, this wouldn't be a matter of if we don't move forward with this bus, that money would then be freed up for aids. It's that,
Right, it doesn't
that money would be transferred.
So our bus proposition that we put to the voters in May will not impact the budget that is currently before you. That stays exactly the same.
Okay, thank you.
Are the costs associated with, the insurance costs, has that been fleshed out? Because cost to repair, replace is higher than cost to repair, replace the diesel?
Not entirely. I'm actually meeting with our insurance agent tomorrow to talk about the annual renewal to get our rate increases. So I have those, and then, I can inquire.
Tell them we want flat.
Yes, we would like that.
Again, recognizing, so we're not, unless everybody is super jazzed and ready to send Carrie.
Well, the insurance
To-
information will have.
My expectation though is that on the 24th, right, that we may be able to give you instructions in terms of getting started on the voucher rate. That's the next step in this. Is that you need to know if that's what you want to do so you can, or
I could probably get going on the voucher anyways, just to get the process going, and then if we decide not to move forward with it, then we don't move forward with it, but I think it might, because I don't want to lose 2 weeks in the process.
Right.
So, and then we can decide at the next meeting which way we're gonna go, but
If you start the process, you're locked into it.
Mhm.
So start the process.
right, because remember, even if we say, yes, we'd like to move forward, our voters still have to approve it, so there's multiple parts of it. So at the event, I might have the NYSERDA voucher, and if the voters don't approve it, right, then it doesn't matter anyway, so you're not locked into it.
so it's different. So we don't have to vote on it, we just have to agree for you to go do the voucher.
Yeah, that is my understanding.
And
If
there's
I could start going through the process and it's like a committal, then I'll, stop it there.
Let us know.
Yeah.
And there's not, the voucher is, that it's not, it's just a matter of completing the steps to get the voucher. It's not like a lottery or an application where you might be denied the amount of the voucher, is it?
Right, it's just a matter of getting it approved.
Genuine, okay. Well, are there grounds that they would not approve the voucher?
I don't know. But I can't imagine for
That would
a
be
bus,
a
it seems to be
deal breaker.
something that they would approve.
So I think we're all good to send Carrie to Voucher Town, yeah? Okay,
Seems prudent.
thanks, and, again, same deal, if you guys, lots of questions on this, CC everybody, and, we'll see what happens, okay? Thank you, Carrie, it's a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks, everybody, like, good questions, good discussion.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of the study.
Yeah, I'm going to explain some of the stuff that Jim already said. My resident engineer. Okay, we're at the second public comment period for items not on the agenda, but I have no blue slips. And thank you to everybody who's voted. So we'll go over the board member reports, and we will start with our students who probably should be like getting to that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, on that note, I have nothing to report, so feel free to comments.
I too just wanted to say that I really appreciated hearing about the lifeline of the French department. I hope we can celebrate those wins and those previous students in some sort of way as we sort of close that chapter. I think that would be lovely. And I just wanted to acknowledge, my appreciation to echo Adam's sentiment earlier about how much work you all put into this and how much you keep it, like people forward in looking at how we go about making those hard decisions, both in terms of thinking of our staff and of our students. And lastly, just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the staff at West Sand Lake who recently saved the life of a student. That is huge in terms of the everyday things our staff does, along with helping them tie their shoes and read and all those sorts of things. So I just wanted to take a moment to really appreciate our school district for that. But I have no other formal board report things regarding the community so on. Tammy, did you have something?
Oh,
It's home. I had a facilities meeting and Megan and I did. Our savings on the project, we're actually in SED approval right now, or did we get that back yet, Jim? We're still in approval, waiting approval. So that's fantastic that we were able to submit for a few other little things to be done with the money that they saved us. And all other projects are currently on budget and on time, so that's great news. And we also spent an entire day at the Capitol lobbying for a few different things, one of which was actually against the electric fleet mandate. So hoping to get that turned around, make it an option. Not that it's not, a great goal at some point to some capacity, just not on board remotely at all with that currently. And a few other things for UPK funding. So we were there letting our voices be heard and taking a stand to make a difference. And hopefully, even if you're not on this board, hopefully you are there sending letters or calling to actually voice your concerns, because I know that we are not alone in the way we feel, and although sometimes our voices try to get muted, we all have them. And so just stand firm with what you believe in and what you feel is true and right. And that's it.
It's only one page. I had occasion to listen to the recent Every Student Every Day podcast regarding the potential bell-to-bell cell phone ban that's been proposed by our governor. The podcast was really good and really informative. I have been gathering data on this topic for several weeks, preparing to propose such a ban to my fellow board members months and months ago when the governor's announcement put all my work on hold. The research I reviewed showed that in other districts and states where this ban has already gone into effect, the outcomes have been overwhelmingly positive. Kids are less anxious, they're performing better academically, and their interpersonal skills have soared. Instead of blindly messaging each other through social media with its inherent filters, these kids are figuring out how to talk with each other. I can't overstress the importance of this. In my last year, my company hired about 100 people around the world. Each candidate participated in at least 2 live online interviews in real time. Whether or not they got the job depended largely on how they performed in those interviews. You see, we work in teams in my company, and the people on these teams need to effectively communicate with each other in real time, sometimes through chat applications like Slack or Teams, but frequently in virtual or in-person meetings. The better we can communicate, the more success we achieve as a company. Since our district's goal is to make our students college or career ready, I actually struggle to think of something that would have more positive impact than improving their social and communication skills through the cell phone ban. So now, as we know, we can't predict whether the governor will actually bring the plan to fruition or not. If not, I am urging my fellow board members to proceed with a bell-to-bell cell phone ban in our middle and high schools nonetheless. It's the right thing to do for our kids and for our community. This is my report.
I want to take a couple of minutes to recognize the time and effort put into proposing the business program, adding back to the high school. I think that that is a wonderful opportunity for the students to make them college and career ready. And actually want to highlight a little bit about Adam's report because it definitely rings true for me. I oversee an entire region of the country, and my team is 100% remote and spread out across the entire country. And so a lot of the leadership centers around helping grown adults function in a virtual work environment. And you'd be surprised how many folks struggle with that. Being able to do a cohesive presentation in a virtual world, being able to have an appropriate conversation and actually connect with people on a human level through a screen. This is the world we live in now, and being able to communicate effectively is, I think, something that was lost quite a bit through COVID, with the sort of anonymity of screens, as it were. Also, something in my professional life that definitely translates a little bit to the co-teaching model. My team grew astronomically over the last year, and so in an attempt to lead better, because there were too many folks in my lifeboat, we added an additional leader to the team, and so I co-lead a large group of adults. So I understand that co-leading a group of children would be 5,000 times harder. And then I am just interested in hearing more about what that's going to look like and how it will further benefit the students, because I think we don't want to lose what our core mission is, and that is the education of the students of our community. I appreciate everybody that came out tonight, and I always hope that they stay to hear our board reports because I do think it's vitally important, but I know that they do sometimes go online and hear them. Want to congratulate our students who have shown up and shown out. Middle school play, I understand, was amazing. Our high school athletes continue to just crush it across a variety of areas. Art and music, and Wednesday, I believe our middle school is having their spring concert, so really excited or the 18th, sorry, next week, not this Wednesday, next week, we're having a middle school concert, so really excited to see that. I just want to convey to the community how important it is to all of us that we make the right choices. And so that while we sit up here and have what is a healthy discord, all of us are trying to do our best for the community in the way that we know how. So whatever that looks like in terms of how we voice our opinions, we're all coming from the same place in our heart. So I will be quiet because it's late, and I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Adam, for the good data on the cell phone usage. It's important to have that for you, so that's good. And I wanted to thank our lobbying team. We certainly appreciate the time you took to not only go there that day and be present and talk to our legislators, but also the time you spend prepping, because it is very important for all of us, and we appreciate you representing the community in that capacity. And I just wanted to say thank you to all our, administration, our faculty, staff, that, again, you work creatively, thinking about how to do it, build our budget the best we can, especially since every year we need to trim our budget, and you guys still come out making it work, and that's impressive. It's impressive every year. When I think we can't do it anymore, you guys figure out a way to do some more. So it is not unnoticed, and it is greatly appreciated. So thank you.
I did make it to the middle school Mary Poppins show, and it was delightful, as Mary Poppins tends to be. They really did a fantastic job. I think that there might even be a high school concert tomorrow night, the choir, so choral, you're right, I got that right. I heard them rehearsing, oh my gosh, they're so good, it was them. They're fantastic. I just want to thank, I do, like, Marion, everybody who came tonight, everybody was like very well prepared, very well informed, and that's, it makes it so that we can do what we're doing up here. And again, like really good discussion, like everybody at all of these tables is bringing some different perspective. And for me, like, it's very educational, so I appreciate you guys, that's all. It's past my bedtime, and that's all I have. Megan, would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Adam, would you like to second that? All those in favor of adjourning this board meeting? All those in favor? Anybody?
Are y'all in favor of
Michelle?
adjourning?
Jess, are you guys in favor of adjourning? Okay, that's unanimous. Thanks, guys. Good night. And if I didn't thank you guys, thank you.
Oh,
It's
are
very-
you team or no?
Sorry.